something else, which is what I was first started to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's working.
How are you?
Did you look at this already? No, this is closed session. Yes, yes, yes.
Call to order the Milan Area Schools Board of Education regular meeting for Wednesday, July 12th, 2023. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, good evening, everyone. All board members are present except Ms. Freight. She is excused. I would like to take this opportunity to have a moment of silence for Skylar Schindel. She was a kindergartner with us going into first grade who passed away unexpectedly at the beginning of this month. So I'd like to observe a moment of silence for Skylar Schindel and her family. Thank you. I do have, I want to make one adjustment to the agenda, so I'd like to make a motion to add agenda item Roman numeral 6.C.2, athletic director compensation, to the agenda. Do I have a second for that?
Support.
It's been moved and supported to add agenda item Roman numeral 6.C.2, athletic director compensation. Is there any discussion regarding that? All right, hearing none, it's been moved and supported to add agenda items Roman numeral 6.C.2, athletic director compensation. Ms. Heike?
Sislo,
Yes.
Farrow,
Yes.
Gutierrez. Yes. Heike, yes. Murray. Yes. Rosenleacher.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
All right, thank you. All right, first up on the agenda is communications and community engagement. This meeting, public comment, and just a reminder that this meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public meeting. There are 2 times for public participation during the meeting as indicated in the agenda. When addressing the board, you'll be asked to state your name. The board determines the amount of time granted to individuals or groups to speak. Each person shall be allowed to speak for up to 3 minutes. Board members shall make question speakers but are not obligated to answer your questions or make statements or commitments in response to issues raised by the public. In general, such items will be referred to the superintendent for advisement, investigation, study, and/or recommendation, or designated as future agenda items for board consideration. Are there any students who'd like to address the board? Are there any public members who'd like to address the board? All right, seeing none, we will move on to routine matters for approval. I need a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of June 28, 2023.
Motion by Rosenleacher.
Support by Gutierrez.
It's been moved and supported to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of June 28, 2023. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Sislo?
Yes.
I just wanted to note that I'll be abstaining from these two votes on those minutes because I was not present.
Thank you, Ms. Murray. Any others? All right, it's been moved and supported to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of June 28, 2023. Ms. Heiko?
Pharaoh,
Yes.
Gutierrez,
Yes.
Heike, yes. Let me start over. Murray,
Abstain.
Rosenleacher,
Yes.
Sislo,
Yes.
motion carries 5-0.
Next up, I need a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting closed session of June 28, 2023.
Moved by Pharaoh.
It's been moved by Farrow. Do I have a second?
Second by Rosenleacher.
It's been moved and supported to approve the minutes of the regular meeting closed session of June 28, 2023. These are found in the clear envelope. Is there any questions or concerns regarding those? All right, I'll have you pass your envelopes to the center. Oh, sorry. All right, it's been moved and supported to approve the minutes of the regular meeting closed session of June 28, 2023. Ms. Heike?
Gutierrez,
Yes.
Heike, yes. Murray,
Abstain.
Rosenleacher,
Yes.
Sislo,
Yes.
Pharaoh,
Yes.
motion carries 5-0.
Next up in the area of bills and reimbursement of expenses, I need a motion to approve the bills and reimbursement of expenses.
Moved by Pharaoh.
Support by Heike.
It's been moved and supported to approve the bills and reimbursement of expenses. Any discussion?
Mr. Sislo.
Yes, Mr. Farrow.
I just wanted to mention to the board that I did have some questions on the latest check detail. However, my questions were answered promptly by administration as well as by Krista Hendricks. So I have no other issues.
Thank you, Mr. Farrow. Any others? So moved and supported to approve the bills reimbursement of expenses. Ms. Heike?
Gutierrez,
Yes.
Heike, yes. Murray,
Yes.
Rosenleacher,
Yes.
Sislo,
Yes.
Pharaoh,
Yes.
motion carries 6-0.
All right, next up in the area of board organization, these are some annual things that we need to take care of in regards to banking, posting required responsibilities, legal counsel, and appointment of MASB delegates. So I need a motion to adopt the following resolutions. To name JP Morgan Chase, Chase Bank, Fifth Third Bank, US Bank, Michigan School District Liquid Asset Fund, Bank of New York Mellon, First Merchants Bank, and MBIA Michigan class as depositories for general fund, payroll, debt retirement, trust agency, food service, athletic, internal accounts for district monies for the 23-24 fiscal year, and that the following staff members' signatures be attached to the respective accounts as listed. General fund, payroll and invoice, debt retirement, food service, trust and agency, athletics, in athletics is the superintendent, assistant superintendent, and finance director. For the high school, it's the Milan High School principal, the Milan High School assistant principal and superintendent. For the middle school, it's the Milan Middle School principal, Milan Middle School assistant principal, and superintendent. Next is Simons Elementary, the Simons principal, finance director, and superintendent. For Paddock Elementary School, the Paddock principal, finance director, and superintendent. And be it further moved that the superintendent or designee is authorized to transfer funds from savings to checking and checking to savings, and is authorized to buy time savings certificates and invest the district monies in accordance with state and/or federal law and board policy. Next, to designate the superintendent or designee to post notices of meetings. C, the law firm of Troon Law Firm PC be retained as district legal counsel for the 23-24 fiscal year. Further move that the superintendent is authorized to extend the retainer relationship with Troon Law Firm PC for 1 year upon its anniversary date. Further move that other legal counsel may be retained for specific purposes as needed. And then to approve the appointments for a voting delegate to MASB and an alternate voting delegate to MASB, which we will talk about in the discussion. So do I have a motion for that resolution?
Moved by Heike.
Support by Murray.
All right, it's been moved and supported to adopt that resolution. We'll first go through the first three with Mr. Gearbaugh, if there's anything to add.
I don't have anything to add unless there are any questions. These are all just annual things that we need to do so that we can operate and function accordingly.
All right, the one thing we do need to determine is for the MASB conference in November in Lansing, that we need to determine our delegate, our voting delegate, and alternate voting delegate for the MASB. I think we need one of each. I don't know if we need two.
Are we down to one now?
Yeah, I think we've just done.
And we just do one each.
Yeah, one.
Okay.
Yep, one voting delegate and one alternate. So is there anybody that would like to be the voting delegate? If you know you're attending the conference, I know I will be attending the conference. I'd be happy to be the voting delegate unless there's somebody else that would like
I'll
to
be the alternate.
Any other? All right, so we'll go ahead and fill in my name as the voting delegate to MASB and Ms. Rosen-Leacher as the alternate voting delegate to MASB. Any other questions or discussion regarding this? All right, it's been moved and supported to adopt the following resolutions: to name J.P. Morgan Chase, Chase Bank, Fifth Third Bank, U.S. Bank, Michigan School District Liquid Asset Fund, Bank of New York Mellon, First Merchants Banks, and MBI Michigan Class as depositories for general fund, payroll, debt, retirement, trust agency, food service, athletic, and internal accounts for district monies for 23-24 fiscal year, and the following staff members be attached to their respective accounts as listed for the general fund, the high school, middle school, Simons, and Paddock. And be it further removed that the superintendent or designee is authorized to transfer funds from savings to checking to savings, and is authorized to buy tame savings certificates and invest district monies in accordance with state and our federal law and board policy, to designate the superintendent or designee to post notices of meetings, that the law firm of Troon Law Firm PC be retained as the district's legal counsel for the 23-24 fiscal year, and further move that the superintendent is authorized to extend the retainer relationship with Troon Law Firm PC for 1 year upon its anniversary. Further move that other legal counsel may be retained for specific purposes as needed, and to approve the voting delegate to MASB, Andrew Sislo, and alternate voting delegate to MASB is Betty Rosen-Leacher. Ms. Heike.
Heike, yes. Murray?
Yes.
Rosen-Leacher?
Yes.
Sislo?
Yes.
Barrow?
Yes.
Gutierrez?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
All right, next up, I want to have a brief discussion on board meeting logistics and the board meeting logistics. As we all know, with the schedule for the theater, the resources that we need to schedule as far as somebody being here to run equipment, the fact that we could potentially even rent out this facility more. Also, just to get back to somewhat more normal procedures in regards to sitting at the board table and having those discussions. We have talked about returning to the boardroom. That does bring some logistics with it, because obviously we want to continue to provide some type of technology to our stakeholders in regards to being able to consume the meeting. And those items have been investigated. We actually received a donated microphone and sound system that we're going to talk about at that meeting, that it's going to increase the audio quality greatly. And then also, just the fact of meeting down in the boardroom again. So we'd like to, my thought is that we could do that for the next meeting. Our technology person has looked into that with that sound system and has a way to has purchased some equipment to record that. So the thought is that we would audio record that meeting, and then provide that audio recording at the next day, and move forward with that. What are other people's feelings in regards into the logistics of that?
Mr. Sislo?
Yes, Ms. Heiko.
I agree that it would be beneficial for all of us for many reasons to move the meetings back to the boardroom. First of all, it's easier to have a more thorough discussion when we're not so spread out across this space. As it is now, I can't see Ms. Rosenleacher when she speaks. And in the boardroom, it's just a little more intimate. I think it helps to foster a more open conversation. That is the one thing that has been lacking since we moved here since COVID. I also think, and I want to make clear too, that just an experience with the organizations that I participate within, when they try to rent this auditorium, it's not necessarily that we miss out on a rental because they need it on this particular night. It's because they need it over a span of nights, and our meeting is in the middle of those span of nights. And so I have had lots of conversations with business owners in town who do rent this space often, and how that kind of conflicts with the way they've been running things for 20 years sometimes. And so it's not just a matter of every other Wednesday we're not renting this out. It does conflict because you need the space for more than just the one night. So I just want to make that clear. I would like us to look into, though, how we can still video record the meeting, because I do think there's a value to that. I think it's what the community has come to expect of us. And so in order to meet those expectations and to provide just a richer experience for the community who may be watching it when it gets posted the next day, I would like us to continue to look into the feasibility, considering costs, because we all know what our budget looks like now, the feasibility of, again, recording that somehow and getting the audio and the video posted the next day.
Thank you. Other comments?
Mr. Sislo?
Yeah, Mr. Farrell.
I too, I like the idea of returning to the boardroom. Since I've been on the board, I don't think I've had a meeting in the boardroom. And I agree with what Michelle said. As somebody that has hearing deficiency, I struggle to hear Sarah Murray down on that end of the table. And I obviously can hear Carrie and Michelle just fine. So when we're in a setting that's a bit more as it should be in terms of our ability to communicate and talk with one another, I do think that that's going to be a better environment, not only for us, but also for our community. I don't believe that the setup that we have here tonight was intended to be permanent. As you can see from tonight's attendance, we can certainly fit some folks, the few folks that are here in the Board of Education meeting room, which is in the district building. So I think Ms. Freight also had sent an email indicating her support. I know she's not here tonight, but I know that she had indicated her support for the transition from the theater to the Board of Education room for our meetings. So I just think that this is the appropriate time to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Farrell.
Mr. Sislo?
Yes, Ms. Rosenleacher.
I would like to echo Mrs. Heike's comments. I think it's great that at least initially we can start with an audio recording, but looking to expand to be able to continue to offer the video would be helpful to our community.
Mr. Sislo? Oh,
Yes, Ms. Monroe.
Thanks. I have a couple of questions. Can you tell me, as a newcomer to the board, like what's the approximate capacity of the boardroom? Like what does that limit us to, so to speak, as far as attendance?
You can fit about 40 to 50 seats in for the audience.
Okay. So that, to me, seems well within reason. Even our highly attended meetings for as long as I've been here, I think 40 to 50 would probably work. how is it handled if, we did have 70 people standing outside the door? Is it standing room? Do we pursue options to relocate? How does that work?
You can relocate. You can offer a video feed to another room as long as you allow other people to be able to come down from that
Public
space to
comment.
public comment.
Right.
There are multiple ways that you can handle it. We could relocate to here as long as the
If it
theater
was
wasn't in
available.
use. There are possibilities, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And we would probably do that ahead of time if we had information that there was going to be a large turnout.
Right.
We had done that in the past, even when we were down in that boardroom. If we knew there was going to be a very hot topic, we had relocated to a different space.
Okay, thanks for that context. With regard to the technology, like, I'm in support of this also. I think it is very reasonable, but I'm just curious. So, Andrew, you had said about next meeting, there might just be audio recording?
Yeah, because the system that we inherited, it needed a recorder. And so our tech people have looked at that. They've got the recorder on hand to handle the audio, and that's all taken care of. So we would just need to talk to them again in regards to a video component. Because right now, there's no camera
Right.
in the boardroom. And then
Okay.
how do we make that work with the recording?
Okay. Well, I would just offer, I don't know if it's appropriate for this particular setting, but the ISD does have a lending library of technology, so it may be worth looking into whether or not something can be temporarily checked out from the lending library at the ISD that we could use in the interim while we sort out what we are going to permanently use. So,
Okay, cool.
other than that, I have no questions. Thank you all.
Can I add, Ms. Murray, this predates you, but I don't remember exactly which meetings there were, but when we had discussions about hybrid learning and whether we were going to come back and full-time, no time, how we were going to handle that, we did have an overflow room where their video was, this meeting was in the boardroom. There was an overflow room where that video was
Fed in.
projected, so you could see it, and individuals from that room were able to come into the boardroom to give their public comment. So we have done that before out of necessity. Then not because there was over 70 people, but because of
Of
social
spacing.
distancing,
Yeah.
we could only let so many people in the room at a time.
Thank you.
Mr. Sislo?
Yes.
I agree with Ms. Heike's comments about the importance of being in the boardroom from a collegiality and a personal perspective. It is far more easy to see each other, as even from here, I can't see Ms. Murray's facial expressions from here, and, under the glare of these lights. I think it's important from the functionality of a working board to be able to interact in a way that we can fully appreciate not only what one is saying, but one's body language and expressions as well. I do have a question, and this is because I have only recently come on the board since we've been in the auditorium, but what is the procedure for when we go into closed session? Where would that happen? Because now when we go into closed session, we go to the boardroom. So what would that procedure look like?
It would be, we would continue to hold closed session in the boardroom, and then anybody who was part of that closed session that needed to be excluded, we would find space for them to go, usually in a conference room or such. So basically, you close the door, and then.
So we provide space within the building for
Yeah.
attendees to go to during
wait,
closed
yep,
session?
To wait, yep.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, good question. All right, thank you for those comments. I think I hear the comments in regards to the video recording, so I think Mr. Gearbaugh, if we could work with the tech department and see, or get something on loan from WISD. I think at least with the next meeting, I believe we are set up to do the audio. We'll see if a camera is available, but at least we'll have it set up over an audio recording for our next meeting in August, and we'll be in the boardroom for that meeting. So, and investigate the video component of it.
I can do that.
Mr. Sislo, do we have to repost? I can't remember if the post gives the location of the
Yeah,
meetings.
so the posting that we approved at the last meeting, it said that meetings are generally held here in
Oh, you're
the
right,
high school
you're right.
theater. Yep, and then potentially in the boardroom. So it's already on the posting that they would be in the boardroom, but we can definitely make that be known.
What I think we'll do is, as Mr. Sislo said, it kind of said they're here and they can be here. I think we'll flip-flop those two and repost it so that it says they're in the boardroom, but they may be in the theater. That way we've got this space. Kind of people already know that we may come here if we have a larger crowd.
And then maybe for those first few meetings, we just put something outside in the
Yes.
hallway.
Yep.
Saying to go down to the boardroom, direct people there.
Yep, we can do that.
All right, so our next meeting will be in the boardroom. All right, next up in the area of finance and operations, I need a motion to approve the annual loan activity application resolution for borrowing from the school loan revolving fund as presented in attachment A.
Moved by Pharaoh.
Support by Heike.
It's been moved and supported to approve the annual loan activity application resolution for borrowing from the school loan revolving fund as presented in attachment A. As you recall from the last meeting, we did approve a loan to be taken out, and then Mr. Gerbaugh will provide any other further details in regards to the application.
So this is an annual application. If you remember, we entered the school bond loan fund in 2009 when we passed the bond to remodel the other 3 buildings besides the high school. We had been in the school bond loan fund previous to that as well. Basically, for those that are new to the board, the way the school bond loan fund works is you can pass a millage and have a certain amount of money that you can bond for, and there is the possibility that your tax collections in the beginning of that process are not sufficient to pay back your bondholders according to the schedule. This is the way that Michigan has chosen to help school districts with bond issues. Other states provide funding, other states do different things. Michigan has provided a loan system. So we did enter that, and since 2009, we have been borrowing from that fund. As you know, earlier this year, when you did the budget revision, we made one final large payment on some bonds and actually retired those bonds. So we now are at the point where our tax collections will be sufficient to pay off the bond holders each year, as well as to start to pay back the school bond loan fund. So if you look at page 2 of this document, you can see that our beginning balance in the school bond loan fund is about $41 million. We will pay back this year $763,000. We will have interest accrue of about $2 million. And so it is estimated that our ending balance will be $42,000,001. Next year and each year, the amount that we pay back will continue to grow, and ultimately the payoff term lands in about, if I remember correctly, the 34-35 school year is when we will have both the bonds and the school bond loan fund paid off. What will happen over the next few years is our bonds will get to the point where they're all paid off, and then we'll be just making payments directly to the school bond loan fund. I can answer any questions on that if anybody has any.
Thank you, Mr. Gerbaugh. Any questions or concerns? All right, it's been moved and supported to approve the annual loan activity application resolution for borrowing from the school loan revolving fund as presented in attachment A. Ms. Heike.
Murray,
Yes.
Rosenleacher,
Yes.
Sislo,
Yes.
Pharaoh,
Yes.
Gutierrez,
Yes.
Heike, yes. Motion carries 6-0.
All right, next up in the strategic area of learning, environment, and culture, we will have a scorecard update and discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Sislo. So I will start just by walking through the scorecard, and after the scorecard is reviewed tonight, it will be put on the board website, so that's available for our community to see the scorecard. There are several updates and several changes being made to the scorecard effective tonight. So the first thing I do want to announce is after some hiatus on some of the goal work due to COVID, if you remember, you approved the strategic plan, if I remember correctly, on March 11th and on March 13th. The world kind of felt a different shutdown. And so some of these goals did get stretched a little bit, but I am proud to say that at this point, no longer do we have any goals on this original strategic plan that are in the red. They are all either yellow or green. So I know there's going to be conversation tonight to look at some of those goal objectives and possibly pull some of the ones that are green off, meaning that, not meaning that we quit doing them, but that they are now in our system and in our natural operations. And so we can take those off and then maybe possibly replace them with different objectives. That will be the second part of this discussion. The first part of this discussion is to just kind of talk through the information that was reported. You can see the first page is the measurements are our test scores. I do have the conditional growth percentiles for NWEA and the CGPs, I'm sorry, and the SGPs. I don't know why they call them something different, but they do, for the M-STEP test. And you can kind of see where our percentages, our percentiles have landed. I left all of the history on there so we can go back to 2018 in our NWEA data and in our M-STEP data. We do calculate a 3-year weighted average. That weighted average is 50% on the current year, 30% on the first previous year, and 20% on the second previous year. That's in line with how my evaluation for data is calculated. You will notice right now that the 2023 M-STEP data is not yet available. We have not received those scores yet, so that will be on the next update, and then you'll see new 3-year weighted averages calculated. Right now, those weighted averages are based on 3 previous years. They don't include the 2023 year yet. In the high school column, you will notice that we do not yet have the SAT data for this school year, so we are waiting on that. Also, it's my understanding that the AP data that we report should be available soon after July 15th. So all of these datas are coming. It's just at this time we don't have them available to us yet. On the next page, participation rates. What you will see is all of the items listed have 2 sets of parentheses. The first number is the 21-22 participation level, and the second set of parentheses is the 22-23 participation level. There are a couple that we don't have filled in. I wasn't able to get numbers in time for the update. I did add middle school bowling, so we do have that on the list, but I was not able to get a number for that yet. Again, if you ever find something that's not listed on there that needs to be listed, we absolutely want to make sure that we are listing all of the things that our students participate in. At the top of the next page, you'll see the promotion rate for this school year. We did have 1 retention in kindergarten, so our promotion rate is 99.1. And also I want to state that the graduation rate for 2023 is not yet available. Those are things that the state calculates and reports back to us, and they don't have graduation rates. It's probably 4 or 5 months from now before we will see graduation rates for the 2023 school year. In the next section, the measurement that was used was daily average attendance. And so you can see the daily average attendance for the 21-22 school year and the 22-23 school year. That is the average percent of students for each month. I basically take the attendance, I take the percentage attendance for each day we had school and then average those for the entire month, and that's the number that you see here. As you know, we are doing some other work to deal with chronically absent students, but this is just the percent attendance. And that is also, that daily percent attendance is what's used. If we ever dip below 75% on any given day, that affects our state aid. So we have to have 75% of our students present on every single school day, or we start to lose state aid for that given school day. The next section deals with student discipline, and I did add some notes on the left to help clarify this to our community. ISS is in-school suspension, OSS is out-of-school suspension, and I did add a note that due to the effectiveness of the in-school suspension process, and that should be ISS, not IIS, I just caught that typo. due to its effectiveness at different grade levels, Paddock and the high school do not run an in-school suspension program. So that's why you'll notice they only list out-of-school suspensions. They don't list in-school suspensions. The next set of data is the ongoing learning environment and culture initiatives. Those are the things that we have done in the different buildings to help continue to improve that learning environment and culture. The next is the current communication methods. Those are all the ways that we communicate. As you know, we do have a district communication committee that's going to be talking about best ways to communicate, how, when, why, what. But right now, these are the methods that we use to communicate with our community. The next section rolled over to this school year, so you can see the staff that have currently been hired for this year, as well as the staff that have resigned or retired during this school year. I will state, and I inform the board this, that at this time, due to the attrition that we have had, it does not appear that we will have the need to implement any layoffs this summer. All of our current employees that are here will be able to remain here in full-time positions with Milan area schools. The last page, some of the measures were some of the things that we are working on in the district to make sure that we keep our facilities up. The big ones there are HVAC and roofs, parking lots, bus purchases. I can tell you that we will be making an expenditure over the next 3 years. The electronic system that operates all of our HVAC that we can use to control all of the HVAC in the district, the software has to be updated. The software we currently have is no longer supported. And so basically it can operate until it doesn't function, and they're no longer doing updates or anything for that software. We have an annual contract with a company for our HVAC system that provides us like a couple of days a month that they come out and they handle whatever things that our maintenance people can't handle. So that cost was rolled into that annual maintenance contract. It's approximately $25,000 to $30,000 a year for the next 3 years. And at the end of those 3 years, that new HVAC control system will all be in place. The next and last item listed are the district fund balance and the fund balance above 10%. Based on when our audit is and when our audit is then reported to the board and to the community, we can expect to have those numbers for this school year by November of 2023. Any questions on any of the information on the scorecard?
All right, thank you for walking us through that. As Mr. Gearbaugh indicated, in regards to the strategic plan and the objectives, there has been a lot of great work that's been done in regards to those where, like he stated, there's no objectives in the red. Several of them moved to green, which is completed or just ongoing monitoring. And then as a result of that, we need to come up with some new objectives, discuss those objectives. Also look at the measures that we're using for each of the areas of the strategic plan. So my thoughts are we would go through this section by section and kind of explain, we can each speak to any changes that we'd like to see in regards to the objectives or the measures for each section and move forward from there. So just in general for me, I do appreciate how you explained the acronyms for like in-school suspension and out-of-school suspension. Perhaps we probably should do that for the other areas as well. Anytime we use an acronym, I mean, most people do know what NWEA is, but maybe it may be helpful to explain what that acronym is in the left-hand column for the community as far as what those stand for. So I think if we do that down the line in the measures area, I think that will be helpful, and we can draw attention to any of those as we move forward. So we'll go ahead and start with the area of academics and academics and programs. So currently, one of the ones that we have in green is this identify current social emotional learning and 21st century programming. And we have several of these that are, the other two are yellow. What are people's thoughts on those objectives?
Mr. Sislo?
Yes, Ms. Rosenleach.
Looking at the first bullet under academic progress, that convening a committee to investigate the EDPs, the educational development plans, based upon the conversation we had around that and the district's investigation into a tool to be able to use to actually implement educational development plans, I think that that objective should actually be changed to now implement or expand the use of those educational development plans with our students. We have the tools now necessary. The district did their investigation to do that, and I think we can move from having a committee about it to doing it.
Thank you. If people agree. So I guess my thoughts on this, so that we're all on the same page, is that we can feel free to make suggestions and we'll have discussion about that. And then what we'll do is we'll make a clean copy of these for the next meeting for us to look over and then have an approval of. So what I'm looking for tonight is the suggestions that we want to
Change.
to include, yep, a change, remove, or edit. We'll keep a master document of that, and then at the next meeting, we'll have a clean version of this for us to work from, that we'll vote on. So tonight, I'm just looking for consensus, like, is that what we want to put on the draft of this? So.
I think maybe I should add too, with the educational development plans, there is a plan in motion based upon information that Mr. Gearbosch shared with us in when and where those plans would be being developed with our students. So like at Paddock during their computer time, in very natural places. So it's not another thing. It's actually integrated into what our students are doing in the most appropriate time and place.
I think the other thing in general, as we look at these objectives, a lot of them were, to identify or investigate, and I think as we were looking at these objectives, really it's just changing the verb as far as what we're going to do in regards to that item. So like Ms. Rosenleacher stated, instead of having the committee, now we're going to expand the use of those developmental plans. So I think similarly for the middle objective to, obviously social emotional learning and 21st century programming has been identified, but maybe we can increase social emotional learning and 21st century programming based on the findings of the success of those learnings.
Yeah. Mr. Sissel,
Yeah.
that was a question that I had, like in regards to that center bullet point, identify current social emotional learning. What kind of data is coming out of those programs? What data is being provided to the board about those programs? I know that they're happening, and I'm a huge, big fan of most of them, but just curious, how will we know that we're meeting those goals around the social emotional pieces?
Sure.
Specifically?
All right, so we're going to say expand the use of educational developmental plan for students. I don't know if we want to expand more upon this, but increase the social emotional learning programming based on the findings and
Based on relevant data
and
or
the
some
data that's
language
found.
around.
Okay.
Yeah, just having more concrete.
And then the last one, just continue the development of the K-12 social emotional learning and 21st century learning curriculum.
Yes.
Does that make sense? All right. Any thoughts on the measures of anything that we want to add, subtract, edit in regards to the measures?
Mr. Sislo?
Yes, Ms. Gutierrez.
I'd like to suggest that when we are reviewing the test scores, that we're a little bit more clear about the years in which there's no data for a reason. So there's no data for years because of COVID hiatus on testing. There's other years where we are, my understanding, not selected as a testing site for that year. And then the NAs. So I think rather than just NA, we can say anticipated to be available July, mid-July or something like that, especially because this is something we share with our community so that we can be most transparent about what this data actually represents.
Thank you.
Can I make a suggestion on that point? Because I worry, when I think of a scorecard, at least in my personal or my professional life, a scorecard is very condensed. It's like a one-pager where you can really look at like the status of whatever project you're working on or whatever your goals are. And so I'm wondering if in that situation, if we can do an asterisk at the
Sure.
bottom or something like that. I just don't want to get to the point where there's so much in this,
Totally
these
fine.
little
I think we can
columns.
footnote it. I think it's just about allowing us to differentiate the
Agreed.
difference between data is coming in and it's not yet ready. It was missing because why, as we look at this in years to come, our mind gets short-sighted a bit and
Yes.
we don't remember. And so it's helpful to have that historical record here.
So just a way to identify those. I support what both of you are saying. How can we do that in a condensed fashion?
So what I'm hearing is down the left-hand column,
That's perfect.
define what NWEA is. I think we can define what CGP and SGP are. Define what's meant by no data and what's meant by NA.
Correct.
So no data was the state did not collect data that year. NA means we are waiting for the data to be collected for we can just define what those are.
Yes.
Do that off on the left, because I agree with Ms. Heike. If I start to put that into the scorecard itself, then things are going to be on two lines and it's going to get messy.
Yeah, I think especially with the NA, because it's not that it's not applicable, it's just we don't have it yet.
It's
So
pending.
NA was not available.
Not available, see? I misunderstood.
So if I put
right?
NA as not yet available,
Not yet
or something
available,
like that,
will, yes.
I may
Or
change it
even
to-
has not yet been reported to us, something
Something along
so there's
those lines.
clarity around
Yep.
it.
Pending state report,
maybe
something
NYA,
like
not yet available from the state or something like that, and define in the left-hand column what that is.
I think that'd be
Does
appropriate.
that make sense? Okay.
The other thing, I don't know that we necessarily talked about how much data we want to go back to. This is providing 5 years of data. I don't know what's appropriate. I mean, most things that I look at are 3 years, sometimes 4 years. 5 years is sometimes pushing it. Where do we want to kind of drop off 2018? Is it how many years of data do we want for this?
I agree with you. I think right now, though, at least through 2023 and maybe even through 2024, because I like seeing the pre-COVID and post-COVID data. Normally, I would agree with you and say, we only need 3 years of data,
Sure.
right?
Yep.
And we only take the 3-year weighted average for Mr. Gearbaugh's evaluation. But right now, I really, maybe it just makes me feel good. I like to see that we've, not only recovered from COVID, but we are excelling after COVID. And so I just maybe one more year would like to see those numbers to make sure that that trend continues.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's easier to see
I
the
was going to
trend.
use a highly skilled methodology that when this went to a second page, it was time to not have that much data. Because again, I think you like to see those trends in front of you, and if all of a sudden you're flipping pages.
Yes.
So I agree, Ms. Heike. I think if we add, like if you look at Simon's, if I add one more year to NWEA math, one more line to NWELA, one to, the M-step and one to the M-step, that's going to add 4 more lines, and we're going to be getting to that point where we're pushing. So I think we can do one more year of data and then kind of have a 6-year when we add the next. So when we add 2025, we roll off 2018. And that way we keep 6 years of viewing, and it keeps it on one page to view. Does that?
That makes sense. I do want to ask a question about the NWA data because that may feed a suggestion. When I look at an NWEA score, is that an average of the entire year? Is it an average of the final exam that we give in the spring?
That
What does
is
that represent?
growth, and I can explain that as well. That's a good thing to put into the notes. That is growth from fall to spring compared to everyone across the country.
Okay, and then on IMSTEP, what does the number represent?
That is the growth of those students since the last time they took that test compared to the rest of the state.
Because I'm wondering, and this may be a little controversial, if we're going to look at the NWEA, which I think measures the growth of individual students across a year, as opposed to the IMSTEP, which is just offered once a year, do we need the IMSTEP data on here if we're trying to condense it a little bit? They both show us the growth, but I always think that the NWEA data is a little more comprehensive than the IMSTEP data is.
I think we originally put MSTEP data on here because the state of Michigan requires that state assessments are a certain percentage of my evaluation.
That's fair.
So I think that's why that was on here. I'm not saying you can't take it off, but I think it was on here because that is a required piece of data for my evaluation.
That's fair. So I didn't have a solution for you, sorry.
I'm sorry, I also think because that is the data that is readily reported by the media, having ours reporting it from our district level in our view with that explanation is helpful to our community.
Excellent. Any other suggestions in regards to the measures? All right, we'll go on to the next section, which is, oops. Oh, yeah, so this, another measure that we have is the participation rate in extracurriculars. So, that's fine. I think this is helpful for us to see. I think probably just, again, another explanation, Mr. Gearbaugh, in regards to what is the first, oh, I see, oh, you did it up there.
You did at the top, yeah.
Yeah, you did it at the top, okay.
Initially, I thought it was boys and girls, but now I see.
Gotcha. Nope, I see that now. I missed it.
I could put off to the left that the numbers represent the number of participants in that activity. I mean, we can get, if we're going to start using that left-hand column to do that a
Yeah, I
little
think,
bit.
I think just an explanation in that left-hand column to provide, so that it just kind of follows the,
And maybe I'll take that off of the top of each column and just
Yeah.
put that in the left-hand column.
yeah.
I was going to suggest either bold it or move it to the column, just so it stands
Right.
out from the rest of the
Exactly.
text in that column.
And then the other measure that we have for this is the promotion rate for each of the grades, and then the graduation rate. Where I think, again, it would probably be helpful to have an explanation of, you know, I mean, I think people would look at this and say, well, we graduated people in June, how come we don't know the graduation rate?
I was there.
So do an NYA again, and that it's not yet available from the state.
And then maybe this is why we need the explanation, because I know I've asked this question before and I forget the answer, but these rates, are these just the high school rates? Or are these all of our Y-High, WAVE, everyone that gets attributed to us?
That is the high school rate.
That's the high school rate?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Any other suggestions with the measures for academics programs? All right, the next area, strategic area, is learning environment and culture. So again, the three objectives that we've had have been met. And similar to that, perhaps some of the recommendations are that we support professional development opportunities in the areas of mental health, trauma, diversity, and responsive teaching. Obviously, there has been a committee convened to assess and review these alternate education options. So maybe an idea here is to review district programming and structures, and then review support staff in numbers and hours, Myself personally, I think, I think that's important. I think there was quite a bit of review, but now we're into monitoring the support staff numbers and hours in regards to that. What do others think in regards to the objectives for learning environment and culture?
Mr. Sissel, I agree with you. I'm wondering, because one of our previous goals was to convene a committee to assess alternative education options, would we use that committee to review the district programming and structures? I just want to be clear who's going to be reviewing and what.
Yeah, I guess, Mr.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit on that. So at this time, the administrative team is doing some review, and then as the school year starts, we're going to be rolling that out and involving staff, and then eventually rolling out and involving our stakeholders in the community. Just some things that we're looking at is if the state continues to move in the direction, which it appears they are, that we have mandatory, well, not mandatory, but paid for 4-year-old preschool for all that want it. That causes some space issues in Paddock, and so there are some things that we would have to look at in order to be able to make space at Paddock to have all of our 4-year-olds there. As you know, right now, our adult ed is at the middle school. There is space at the high school where we could move that to, and it might make sense to get that adult ed into the building that it more fits with. And so those are kind of some of the things that we're looking at. And what we kind of want to do is the administrative team get some ideas put together, then involve the teachers and the other staff in the district, and then expand out and bring our stakeholders in. So it will involve a large group. It will probably be a larger group than that committee was. So that's why I kind of didn't put that there.
That's fair. We just want to make sure we're aware of who's, yeah. It's easier to measure that way.
Other thoughts in regards to those objectives?
It's good direction.
Do we want that to say review district programming and structures with all stakeholders or or something like that? Would that help clarify that? Or are you okay with this wording as long as we know that's the... I mean, remember, part of what happens with these, and this kind of answers Mrs. Murray's question earlier too, is remember, each time I do a quarterly update on my evaluation, I report out on each one of these. And so that's where you gain the information. So if at one of those I said, well, here's what we've been doing, and you go, oh, no, hold on, let's nudge you a little bit this way, then that shifts. So I don't know that it has to all be written here. It's those quarterly updates is where you guys have that time to give me feedback and say, okay, you're headed down the path kind of, but that type of thing. Does that, I think that answers your question a little bit too.
Yeah.
Okay.
That makes sense.
So Ms. Heike, did you want to add something to that? Recommend
No,
adding something?
as long as we're all, I'm comfortable with it, as long as you're comfortable that gives you enough guidance, and you're comfortable with the fact that at the next quarterly review, we might say,
Yep.
yeah, no, that's not what we meant at all.
Absolutely.
All right, so the measures that we have for this are attendance. I think we all have seen the importance of attendance in regards to academic progress. Obviously, we've got the new policy that was rolled out and is going to be communicated several times to the beginning of the school year. So I would imagine we want to continue to monitor attendance as a measure here.
Mr. Sislo?
Yes.
I agree. I think continuing to monitor attendance is extremely important. I do wonder that now that in light of the new policy, we have some very clear guidelines that both we and have been shared with the community about definitions of what chronically absent means versus truancy. I wonder if reporting on the numbers of students who are defined as chronically absent or defined as truant may be helpful, because as we look at this, there's no information about whether the 5 to 7% of students in a given month that are absent are the same students. And I think that having that quantification will help us understand the scope of the resources that might be needed to address some of those systemic issues related to chronic absenteeism.
I agree. While I appreciate all these numbers, you know, maybe what we can do is, you know, set a floor, and if the attendance rate dropped at any of the schools below that floor in a month, you let us know. But I'm much more interested in how many kids do we have that are chronically absent, how many kids do we have that are truant, and what are we doing to address and help those students?
Is there a size that you would want before we report it?
Yes, the state size is 10 for any subgroup. So if it's less than 10, I
So
don't think
if
should
we have
report
less
it.
than 10 chronically absent and I guess, how do you want that? By grade level, by building? Like, how would you want to receive the chronically absent data? If we
Can
went
I-
by building, we probably would hit the N and it wouldn't be an issue. I think if we go to grade level, you could have some N issues where you don't have enough students to really report.
Well, that was my concern. So if I'm comfortable seeing it by building. But if we've got 3 kids at Paddock that are chronically absent, I kind of want to know. I want to know.
But could
right?
that be something that Mr. Gearbaugh reports out to us during his quarterly evaluation, but isn't a part of the scorecard because that's public information, and an N of that small could potentially be identifiable? While I recognize everybody doesn't, but people do talk. And they know Susie over here, she's never in school, so she's one of those 3.
I agree. I think from a resources
fair.
point of view, and given that we now have a district-wide social worker for those in the community that aren't aware, I think having even a district-wide number to start with would help us communicate with our stakeholders about the importance and the need of someone in that position working at the district level, as we've discussed, who supports some of the resources and connections that are needed for these students, for the issues they may be experiencing. Certainly, I agree with Ms. Heike that at the building level, there's additional supports, and that may be information that we want to share within quarterly meetings, within the board, to see if there's extra resources a particular building may need. But I think in the issues of anonymity, yet understanding the resources the district needs to put towards this, district level is an appropriate place to start.
Wait, you just want it reported out, I guess you just want it reported at a district level as opposed to with the 10, which is already reported out on the building level?
I think having on the scorecard, I think Mrs. Rosenleacher's point of having something on the scorecard versus what is something that we within the board can understand in a more confidential format. So I think at the district level, putting numbers on the scorecard is appropriate, because I do worry about having small numbers broken down by building may compromise the anonymity of those students.
Even if we report out at 10 and above?
I think 10 and above is fine by building.
Okay.
Potentially, maybe a solution is that, you know, if it's 0, you put 0. If it's less than 10, you just put less than 10.
And that's what the state does.
And if it's greater,
Okay.
So it would be
That's
0,
fair.
it would be less than 10, or it would be 11 and
Okay.
or a number higher.
That's fair.
So
Yeah.
do it by building. It's either 0, less than 10, or the number it actually is above 10.
does that make sense, Ms. Rosenleacher?
Yes, that's perfect.
And then are we going to set a floor by which, if the attendance drops below that percentage in a given time frame, that we'll get that report out as opposed to these monthly percentages?
I think we can keep both. I mean, if we only keep 2 years of the percent attendance, like we have, so in other words, next year, we take off the 21-22 school year, there would be room at the bottom of this page to add one more row to the chart that talks about chronically absent data. Because chronically absent won't be by month, it will be a snapshot in time at the time the scorecard's done, so it won't need as many lines in the chart.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. The next measure that we have for this is disciplinary actions, where we're measuring out-of-school suspensions, for Paddock in the high school, and then in school and out of school suspensions for Simons and the middle school. Thoughts on this measure?
Mr. Sislo?
Yes, Ms. Rosenleacher.
I know that Ms. Freight indicated that she believes that our expulsions should also be reported here. Again, in some ways, we get into the issue of identifiables. Also, this scorecard and these numbers are reported by building. As such, buildings don't expel students, the Board of Education does. And because the expulsions are done in public, I think that's part of our transparency already. And personally, I don't think there's a need to add that data to this scorecard, because we're looking at discipline by building and then the discipline from the board.
Mr. Sislo, I agree with Ms. Rosenleacher. I mean, part of why we asked for this data was so that the board had an insight into the disciplinary actions that were taking place at the buildings, because we don't have a line of sight into that. When it comes to expulsions, we are the body that expels a student. So we know exactly how many students we expelled in the last school year, from what building they came from, and the offense. So I don't know, I don't see that there's a need to, and let me say too, the public knows, because we do come back from the closed session,
Yes.
we do vote on the expulsion. So that information is already public.
And a part of our minutes.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I don't think it's necessary.
I also agree.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah, and just to, I mean, Ms. Rosenleacher did indicate, Ms. Freight's email, I just want to say that she said, I would like to request adding expulsions to the disciplinary action section. I believe this adds merit to the board's goals of communication, community involvement, and transparency. So,
And I want to acknowledge that. I appreciate that she voiced that,
Yes.
that opinion and that concern.
so like I said, we'll definitely have this as a draft for our next meeting, so.
Mr. Sislo?
Yes, Ms. Gutierrez.
In addition to that suggestion, and I'd just like to reiterate, I agree with Ms. Freight's sentiment about transparency and the value of being open with that information, yet I think we have achieved that, as Ms. Rosenleacher has already articulated. I think in line with the same comment I had about attendance and wanting to identify the types of resources that may be needed, I would like to suggest that we think of a way in which to quantify repeat incidents or repeat offenders. If I hesitate to use that term, and so I apologize. But
How
when we're
about
looking,
students with chronic behavior concerns?
yes, I think that's appropriate, because particularly as we're looking at some of these numbers, it would be helpful for us to understand the number of students that need perhaps some disciplinary attention or resources that go beyond what they are getting with the ISS or the OSS. And quantifying that would be valuable. And again, within the context of sample size, as we just articulated with the attendance issues.
I would agree with that, because then that helps us know, if we've got a particular issue or a particular cohort of students. We've at least since I've on the board, we've known there's been some grade levels, we have some cohorts that we've been watching for a while, but this will help put this all together so that we can have some information to ensure that resources are being, distributed the way that they need to be, or, we'll then have some data if, there's a request for another psychologist or some more behavioral specialists. We'll have had that data all along to understand where that request is coming from, as will the public.
Yes, I agree. Thank you, Ms. Gutierrez, for raising that, and I agree with you also, Ms. Heike, that school discipline goes so much deeper than students who end up suspended in one way or another. There's a whole process of PBIS that happens before those suspensions, and if we intend to be proactive, then that's where I think the rubber meets the road, honestly, is where those changes are occurring and how our PBIS system is being leveraged effectively or ineffectively within those student cohorts. So I would support looking into how we could, I want to be cognizant of adding additional reporting. Like I want to streamline that as much as possible and be sensitive to our teachers and administrators in terms of generating that data and pulling it.
Well, I guess what
But,
I'm
that's-
thinking potentially is if the number of in-school suspensions plus the number of out-of-school suspensions is greater than 10, a number is reported next to it. It's and less than 10, or it's the number.
Well, but I'm trying to process what you guys are seeing here. So if what you want to know is,
Like, let's look at.
there were
Look at-
16 and 9, and that involved a total of 7 kids,
Right. You would just put.
I'm going to tell you more than likely, you're going to, if you just look at the numbers that are here, it's going to be less than 10 almost all the time.
All the time, yeah.
Well, I guess, I'm sorry.
So I'm trying to understand what you guys want.
Yeah, I don't
and-
think at least that's not what I thought you meant, Ms. Gutierrez. I guess when I look at this overall picture, so if I look at the 2022, 2023 school year at the middle school, and I see, multiple in-school suspensions every month, multiple out-of-school suspensions every month, are those attributable to, or are the vast majority of them attributed to, or are there 20 children that are accounted for in there? Or are there 75 children
think
that
we're
are
almost
accounted
saying
for?
the
Right.
same thing.
I think back to what Ms. Rosenleacher was saying, it's number of students with chronic behavior problems. Is that how you word it? Chronic behavior situations. So like if you just concerns, thank you. That's the word I was looking for. So if you look like in the middle school, for example, in October of this year, we had 26 out of school suspensions. Within those 26, how many of those students were repeatedly suspended? Was that 26 individual students, or was it 5 students accumulating, a number of days, that kind of thing?
I wonder.
Understand, this is not the number of days,
Right.
this is the number of suspension incidents.
Correct. So
So when you see 20, like in October of '22, you see 29 in-school suspensions, there were 29 times that some student was issued an in-school suspension.
But that student may be the same student. He or she may have been suspended at the start of the month and again at the end of the month.
correct.
I think-
Agreed, but if we're going to use less than 10,
No, I agree.
it would always be less than, well, I
So may
shouldn't say always, but
may
it's
I
almost
clarify what
always
I was
going to be less.
suggesting? So like we have with a running definition of what it means to be chronically absent or what it means to be truant, I think we can put forth a definition of what Ms. Rosenleacher called students with chronic disciplinary concerns, I believe was the terminology.
Behavioral concerns.
Behavioral concerns. And so perhaps that definition is 3 suspensions at any point in the academic year. And so at some point, we have a running total of how many students there are in a building that have been suspended more than 3 times. And then what proportion of all of the suspensions that represents,
So it's not thinking of it by month.
not by
It's
month.
year month. It's,
No.
we've got it, because potentially the 29 in October plus 8 in November plus 8 in December, I think that's what we're trying to get at is, so.
So what I would
what's
say
that
is, if
definition?
you're looking at this, you might start to get, depending on chronic behavior concerns, I think there's got to be a definition. Is it 5 times they've been, 3 times? So maybe by December, January, we have 2 students who are chronically having behavioral concerns. The report's going to be less than 10.
That's correct. So it will grow over time. I mean, it can only grow
Right.
over time, right?
Right.
And I don't think the value of it is in a given month. I think the value of it is looking holistically over the course of an academic year. In particular, I think we could probably go back and calculate that for the 2 years we have here, because just roughly looking at this, it looks like, okay, maybe in the middle school in 2022, we had something like 200 suspensions or something. Are we talking about 200 individual students, or are we talking about 20 students who were suspended every single month? Those are 2 very, very different types of resources that are needed to address and support those students, and frankly, to help and support our staff managing those as well. And so I think that we do want to be cognizant of not reporting small numbers, but that number will grow over time.
I'm wondering, could we ask our administrative team, along with maybe our social workers and counselors, to kind of come up with what that number or that definition might look like? Because I think they're going to be more able to identify, because there's situational issues too going on with some of our friends here who may be having repeat incidents, but we don't know everything. It more than likely as not incorrigibility, there may be something underlying that, and so I think it would behoove us to really lean into our administrative team because they know best on what that might look like and how we could better define that and understand that from the board perspective before we start reporting something in there. I love that idea, so we can make sure that we are providing the support that these students, our children need. But I'd rather really lean into our administrative team and the social workers and the professionals who are working with these students before just kind of putting a cut line down. Again, I think about one particular friend who came in front of us who, there were things there and very much owned his own difficulties. And those are things we wouldn't have known, frankly, if he wouldn't have been brought before us. So I think I'd really love to hear from our administrators on this.
But Mr. Gearba, are you saying that you can do that, but in a school year, that number will be less than 10, so that data really won't tell us what we're looking for?
I don't want to state that unequivocally, but
Okay.
I can tell you right now, if you look at Paddock,
Yeah.
and you look at Simons, probably the likelihood, they might have one or two students that are meeting a definition of chronic. So I guess you would know when it went from 0 to less than 10, but you're probably never really going to see the number.
That's fair.
Middle school, you might. I don't know that we would get to 11 students at the middle school that had chronic. High school, probably not. But at least you'd know when it clicked from 0 to something.
Well, and
That's
I
true.
agree with Ms. Rosenleacher's suggestion to lean into the administrators. We could also report a percent, and that's not violating. So
Yes.
I think still would be helpful to know, of all of the suspensions in a given building, what percent of them are by someone who has met whatever definition is set.
Yeah.
I think that's not a bad way to go. Because as I'm looking at this data from this last school year, and I'm specifically looking at the middle school, when you go to October and you look at October, and then look at November, and then December, the board was really, really busy. And then the numbers dropped pretty dramatically.
Yes.
Right? So I'm seeing, I look at that and I see evidence of some really amazing work taking place.
Yes.
And that's why I really want to lean on these team of really great leaders to help us through this.
Yeah. And I think to the context that we would add for the public, by clarifying those numbers, because if I am a layperson outside of this board table and outside of the classroom or the administrative setting, when you look at this data and you see, oh my gosh, 29 ISS, 26 OSS, that to me could communicate, a building in crisis. And that was, in my opinion anyway, not what was going on at the middle school. It was not a building in crisis. It was, students requiring a heavy level of support. And to Ms. Rosenleacher's point, if you look at those numbers, they dropped, steadily throughout the year due to the incredible work of our administrative team. And having some additional context, whatever that ends up looking like, whether it's percentages or what, allows us to communicate what's happening in those buildings to our community in a more effective manner, by being able to demonstrate, this percentage of these suspensions are attributable to, this percentage of students. It's not what it looks like, I guess, if that was clear.
Yeah, it's clear. I mean, I don't think we'd need to go back and do any calculations, but I think we just need to go, have Mr. Gearba go back to the staff, provide a definition of chronic behavior concerns, and then how best those are reported.
I like the idea of what % of the suspensions were applied to students that meet a definition. I think that's a way, I like that concept. I think
like
that
that too.
works.
I like that too.
So, you know, if there are 40 suspensions and 4 of them are attributable to one student, you'd say 10% of the suspensions were attributable to students with chronic behavior issues.
Yes.
You'd kind of get a feel. And it doesn't tell how many kids, because that might be 1 kid, it might be 2 kids, it might be. But, okay,
Yep.
all right. I will work with the admin team and we'll figure out a way to appropriately
Yeah, and
report that.
I don't think, I mean, we wouldn't expect that for the
No.
next meeting. I think, yeah, just
Yeah.
that we're on the same page in regards to that. I don't know if Ms. Rosenleacher stated it, that the expulsions are listed as out-of-school suspensions. Did you mention that?
I did not, thank you, I did. I did see clarification that any suspension or any student that was brought before the board as an expulsion is reported as a suspension. So those suspensions are recorded in the building data because that's as far as a building can go, and then it's brought before us.
Right. They're technically suspended before they're expelled.
Correct.
So they are
Thank you.
counted.
So they are accounted for in these numbers. Thank you, Mr. Sislo.
Yes. All right, any other discussion about suspension and behavior? The other measure we have there is ongoing learning, environment and culture initiatives. I think that's valuable. Anybody?
Yes, I'm wondering, should our summer programs be on here as well?
Yeah, I say so, yes.
I mean, it's based upon our last report from Mr. McMahon, they're also going very well, so I think that that would be really important information. Our community will also know then that we're still here for those children who need our continued support all summer long. So,
Well, and I realized I also need to add the body safety training that you approved at Paddock.
Yes.
That's not on here.
Yep.
All right. Moving on to the next strategic goal for communications and community engagement. A lot of our former objectives were in regards to convening the committee and the survey. Obviously, Mr. Gearbaugh and the staff have implemented the year-end survey for the community to participate in, and a committee has been convened. So obviously, we need to look at some new measures or some new objectives in regards to communication. Some ideas are to review and implement the recommendations that come from the District Communication Committee. And then in regards to the survey, adapt communications based on the communication perception in the survey responses. And then some of the work that Mr. Hoskins provided to us on a greater level to investigate district branding and developing a marketing plan were some of the ideas for new objectives in this area. What do folks think about that?
I'm generally fine with this. I wonder if the adapt communications, is that a 2-step process? Because do we need to get the perception survey results? It seems like you got to look at the perception survey results and what people are saying and then adapt it. But it seems to me it's a 2-step process.
Well, I just received the end of year survey that we did last year at the end of last school year. And remember, we added communication questions at that bottom. So I think the first and second bullet there, the potential new first and second bullet, the first one, review and implement recommendations. Some of those recommendations are going to come out of them looking at that perception survey responses. And then, so it's kind of making sure that we do adapt to those.
I mean, we could say-
So that kind of makes sure that that survey data is being reviewed and used. That might lead to some of the work of the district communication committee, but they might do work outside of that. So I felt that that maybe needed to be separate.
So maybe the first one is engage district communications committee.
In reviewing the perception survey results, right?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, I like that. And then the second one would be,
Then I think the second one's just implement their recommendations based on the perception survey.
yes.
Okay, so
Can you repeat the first one again?
Sure. Engage district communications committee to review perception survey responses.
Thank you.
And then the second one would be implement district communication committee recommendations based on, well, I guess you don't have to say based on, they may have other ideas in addition to the perception survey.
Okay, thank you.
I'm curious about the word implement, though. Will we, I don't know that we would necessarily implement all recommendations. Some of them may not, once they come to us, we may not see them as feasible. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I'm wondering how we could reframe that a little bit.
okay, so let me make sure that, so the first one is engage the district communication committee in reviewing the communication perception survey responses.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
the first one. Okay. And the last one, investigate district branding and develop a marketing plan. That one's acceptable?
I think that's fine, yeah.
Okay, so we need to figure out what the second, the first and second kind of became the first a little bit. So the second one
Yeah.
is,
Well, I mean, I guess if you want to, because we can change these throughout the year, right? So maybe the first, maybe there only is right now, engage the communications committee to review the survey results, and then based on what the district communications committee says, we can determine what the next, gate check will be then.
I think once they're reviewing the results, at the same time, they can be developing recommendations.
Agreed.
I think I see what you're saying, Michelle, that they need to review the results, and then they need to formulate their recommendations, and then there will be a conversation about those recommendations before deciding what to implement, because it may include subtractions and/or deletions. But I think having those 3 steps acknowledged in the recommendations is what we're going for.
So maybe the second goal then is to review and analyze the recommendations made by the district communications committee.
Yes.
Full stop, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I guess, I'm not disagreeing. I think the number 2, though, I mean, it should involve more than just the district communications committee. I mean, I think we're talking about the administrative team, we're talking about, so, I mean, communications, it's not going to be all determined by the district communications committee.
I agree, and actually, one of the things I was going to raise is, I think that it's important that the results from that survey, as well as the recommendations, be shared with not only the communications committee, but administration, the board, the stakeholders in the community. I think there can be baked into this transparency across the process, but I think the process is still review, develop recommendations, implement recommendations.
So can you say, engage the district communications committee and administrators, the administrative team, and other stakeholders in reviewing the perception survey results?
I think the 3 you have, we already, the survey data that we receive back is, part of the process is sharing that out with the buildings. They actually get a specific building report. Also, if you remember last year, after that data was all finalized, I came to a board meeting and provided a summary of all of that data, and we actually published the data on the website. So those pieces are already there. I think the way you have them, so if the first one is engage the district communication committee in reviewing the communication perception survey responses. The second one is review and analyze the recommendations from the communication committee. And then the third is investigate district branding and develop a marketing plan. I feel like that covers what you're trying to do. The other things are already shared and published and put out. I mean, if you want to give me something that I can easily check off because we're already doing it, that's great, but.
Well, I'm wondering though,
I like this checklist.
because this is what you're doing in coming back and reporting to us. Do we need to include though in that second bullet then, because the administrative team are engaging in a similar conversation about communications from their individualized buildings? Should that be included in that second bullet? I mean, I know we specifically want you to work with the district communications committee on that perception data.
I think that the administrative team is going to be involved in the district branding and developing a marketing plan. That's where they're going to be involved, and then the two will kind of mesh and flow and
Okay.
be sounding boards for each. So the administrative piece is that investigate branding and develop a marketing plan.
Okay.
So maybe I complicated it.
No.
Well, if we have it, can you read that second bullet again, Mr. Gearlaw?
Review and analyze the recommendations from the district communication committee. And then I think as that becomes green, it very quickly becomes implement the
Recommendations.
appropriate, the approved,
Yeah.
the however we move
Feasible.
forward.
So we can adjust and modify it throughout the year.
Oh, absolutely.
You can
Yeah.
modify these I mean,
Perfect, right.
anytime one of these becomes green and is solid green, the board can say, time to move that one off or reword it.
Great,
That can happen, I mean, that can happen at any quarterly update.
right.
We kind of hadn't yet, because we just hadn't, because of COVID, we kind of got a little slowed
Right.
down on this. I think that's going to start happening more often. Things are going to move on and off of this a little bit quicker now. Because remember, ultimately, you have a goal, which is that big picture,
Right.
5-year.
Right,
These strategies, or these objectives
Right.
can be 3-month, 4-month, 1 year, that type of thing.
yeah. Do we think we could move forward and then, at least for now, because we'll come back and look at it again at the next meeting?
Yeah, it's definitely, obviously, this is something that we look at least quarterly.
Yes.
So, right now, the measures we have are the current communication methods. Thoughts on measures for communication?
Oh, measures.
I forget, is there like a score that comes out of that survey? That-
Not specific to communication. no.
Okay, okay. Or we can continue to think on that.
Can I throw a little monkey wrench in here? I'm just curious. Would it be valuable to us to have a percentage of participation in parent-teacher conferences by building?
Can I be a cynic? Isn't
Yeah,
that,
please.
Isn't that more a function of parental involvement as opposed to district outreach?
Yes?
I don't know, I mean.
But there's an
develop-
and to that, I
Yeah,
think?
I was gonna
Yeah,
say
if you
both
look at
and.
the goal, to foster student, family, staff, and community engagement and partnerships.
I just want to be careful because,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want there to be a perception that the staff or the administration are being reviewed based on parental participation in parent-teacher conferences. And I also want to be cognizant of the fact that, as kids get older, that participation, I will admit, I don't go to see every single teacher at the high school or the
Yeah.
middle school, but I didn't miss an elementary school parent-teacher conference, right? And so I think we just need to be cognizant that as kids get older, that also changes, so.
We could record attendance at Big Red Board Chats.
We could.
Uh-huh.
We could. Do we have big red board chats on here? Well, except for that's a board function. See, that gets away from the building function again.
Right.
Or the administrative, yeah.
Yeah.
And I agree, parent-teacher conference is the thing, like, I can sit here and tell you, the high school will always have the lowest percentage.
Sure.
But their parents are in the buildings more often than, because of all of the activities and sports and things going on. So it's like, what measure would you use? It's,
Fair enough.
I mean, I guess, you know, you can also say, I mean, when you go back to the participation rate in extracurriculars, I mean,
Right, yeah.
that's very skewed one direction for obvious reasons, right? So
Right.
the parent-teacher conference attendance is going to be skewed.
Fair
for a very
point.
different-
I withdraw.
No, I-
No, it's great.
All right, should we move on
Yes.
to the next strategic area of personnel and leadership? So again, these three objectives have been met. Some ideas moving forward is to, in regards to, again, the staff take the same survey, so review and adapt operations based on those surveys that we get back. To expand programming for the support of new teachers, years 0 through 5. Mr. Gearba has spoken to us about his new teacher orientation program. And then again, instead of reviewing salary and extra duty compensation, is to monitor all district salaries. Thoughts on some ideas for those objectives?
I'm comfortable with these three.
I like these three.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
What is meant by the word monitor? Can we provide some context? And I'm thinking in light of the recent board meeting where we looked at a salary of an individual in the district that was out of range of market value. And so whether or not this is going to include an active process or whether it's going to be monitoring from a budgetary standpoint of making sure checks are getting paid and so forth.
I hear what you're saying. So be perhaps a more proactive process of monitoring and adjusting.
Yeah, I think if that's the case, and if that's the intent, and I think as a board, that's something we can discuss. But if so, I think a more active word than monitor could be used.
Other thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Ms. Gutierrez as well.
Yeah, I absolutely concur. I don't just want to look at it and watch it. I want to know what actions are being taken or not taken in light of that monitoring data that we, glean from looking at staff, salaries across the district.
Yeah, I mean, I think it should be a consistent process. It should be readily available to us as a board.
Understand the majority of that happens during negotiations. I mean, you've really got 15 to 20 employees that aren't addressed through negotiations. So I think we can change that word, and it's a lot of that's covered through negotiations.
Well,
I'll
I
be
mean,
very
while
honest.
it's
Part of the
still-
reason I wanted to put this on is it now gives me permission to bring those to the board a little more often. Not that I feel like I have to have permission, but it's always been a little, I get stuck between a rock and a hard place. I'll put it that way, when trying to determine when, how, do. So I think putting it into the scorecard, something along those lines, then, you guys can still say yes or no, but it gives me a little bit more support to say I should be bringing those things to the board.
Well, I think that while the vast majority of the staff's salaries are controlled by the contract, I still want to know how those salaries are keeping pace, particularly with our MASB cohort, right? And in the county, because that helps me as a board member know when we're approving budgets and negotiations begin, and there's discussion on negotiation strategies, where we fall. And you do give this to us, but I want to make clear that while the vast majority are controlled by contract, the monitoring of where we stand is also very important. And I think for a lot of those staff members controlled by contract, it's eminently important. Like I find that more important than, not to rank everyone, but I really want to know where our teachers and parapros and everyone fall within the pay range.
Could something like monitor, evaluate, and make recommendations on district salary or something? I'm trying to figure out what wording gets to kind of what you're asking for.
I hear that. The reason why monitor is sticking with me right now is because I think about if we're asking you to do that in comparison to our MASB districts, our county, or our league district salaries, then that's going to take some monitoring. So it would be monitoring in comparison, not monitoring, because we know what our people are making, right? But what are we monitoring what's happening around us and in those peer groups so we can make good decisions and having our people progress in relationship to those other peers.
Yeah, update and adjust, provide the board the opportunity to update and adjust, kind of on a consistent basis. I mean, there's obviously the teachers are under the teacher contract, but there are a host of groups that are not. And I think if we can get some of that information from groups that are not under contract and take a look at those collectively, it's a bit smoother, a bit more efficient for us to manage. Just my 2 cents.
Well, I think that even with the teacher contracts, whether multiple year contracts, if we got a windfall from the state in any given year, you can open those contracts up and negotiate additional pay raises. I mean, so while they're controlled by contract, that doesn't mean that you can't negotiate a change mid-contract term. So.
I think Ms. Rosenleacher hit on the more active part. What I was looking for in this word is it's not just monitoring in a unifocal way within ourselves, but it's monitoring in a way that we're benchmarking our staff salaries, whether they're under contract or not, to peer institutions. I'm not a teacher, I'm not a school employee, and so I don't have a real context of how competitive our salaries are. And so having a regular process by which we are evaluating those, I think is beneficial both to do right by our employees, but also from a district marketing standpoint, to know that we are a place where we recruit excellent teachers and provide an environment in which they can thrive, and that we compensate them appropriately. And so I think it's both an introspective piece from a budget point of view, but an outward-facing piece to understand where we compare to other districts.
So I think you just said the word.
Benchmark, I was just going to say the
Benchmark, okay.
Monitor and benchmark.
That's the word we were looking for.
Mr. Gearbaugh, we have the EA, right, the teachers group, and then we have the ESP group, our support staff, correct?
We have we have a food service. We have a group that is our parapros, our administrative assistants, and our custodial and maintenance. We have a transportation contract, and then we have an administrator handbook. So there are 4 things that guide.
So all of those support staff ones, though, they're separate?
No.
They all fall underneath that?
Well, transportation is one.
Okay.
Food service is one. The third one has administrative assistants, parapros, and custodians and maintenance in it.
Okay.
And then there's the administrator.
And then
The people
teacher
that
group.
aren't under the. and
Then you have a
teacher.
non-affiliated group. You have
Right.
non-affiliated
There's a small
individuals.
group of, transportation director,
Yeah.
athletic director, technology director.
I
The
think
people
for-
in my office.
Right, for clarity's sake, for us on the board, understanding that they really are considered non-affiliated, so they're not connected to a particular group versus saying not a contract. right? They're non-affiliated,
With
and
a
I think that's a
bargaining,
much
yes.
more clear way to understand who that group of people or individuals
They're not
are.
under a bargained agreement.
Right.
Correct.
Non-bargaining.
Yes, not a bargaining unit.
Thank you.
And I would think, from my perspective, that non-affiliated group is the group that I think we need to address a bit more frequently.
Minimally when we address contracts, the other contracts, which I think hasn't been something we've necessarily been in a position to do in the recent past.
So are we good with monitor and benchmark?
Yes.
Great.
So- And I agree, Mr. Gearbo, I think that'll help bring you out of that rock and hard spot to bring those forward. So,
And I think we have done that to some degree. When I bring you that other group,
Yeah.
I refer to it as the other group. It's it's the non-bargaining member group. The last time I did that, I think I had 3 people in that group
Right.
that I specifically said, I think we need to do more than the norm for
So
them
that's
to
a-
start to write it. So I
Right.
think just doing that maybe a little bit more effectively.
Right.
And maybe a little bit more often.
So that's a good point. For those, because we do have new board members, the last time, after the contract was negotiated, Mr. Gearbo did bring us the non-bargain for group, the list of people and the recommendations of raises for that group. And we approved some various levels of increase for that group based on his recommendations. So it's not that it hasn't been monitored and adjusted. I think this just provides more of a framework. We want to see the framework behind this, and maybe and I think it's also, it's probably part of negotiating a 3-year contract versus 1-year contracts that we've done in the past. Where that non-affiliated group is, they don't come in front of us as often when we are operating within a contract for the bargain for.
Well, and I think it sets the tone. I think it sets the tone that, Brian, you don't have to come to us and ask for this, but that this is an expectation, and that this is something that we as a board want to be partners with in making sure our staff are compensated appropriately.
Yes.
Within the bounds of the budget.
Pardon?
Within the bounds of the budget.
Of course.
All right. So I think we're good with the objectives. The measures we have are new hires, and then resignations and retirements. Anything folks want to see in regards to changes for the measurements?
Can I just make a suggestion that at some point, the resignations and retirements should drop off? Because at some point, these people are entitled to some anonymity, I think.
Well, he has done that.
Okay.
This is
just for the.
Yeah, this is basically since the last day of school last year, so I cleared out
Okay.
all of last year's list.
Okay.
So that will be the goal moving forward is at this time of year, each year, we'll clear out everything that happened last year and we'll start with what's
Okay.
happened since the last day of school to this year.
So these people will stay on, is what you're.
These people will stay on until this time next year. This list
Okay.
will grow. And then at this time next year, we'll wipe it clean and put on next year's.
Okay.
I mean, this list will still grow because we may have some that happen throughout the year.
Well, they will stay on because this was at the end of the 22-23, so we're moving into 23-24.
Right, but those resignations and retirements affect the staffing for the 23-24 school year.
Got it. Thank
That's the
you.
way I look at it.
Okay.
Because anyone that resigned within the 2022-2023 school year has been,
They're gone.
they're off this list.
Yes.
Okay, fair enough,
Yep.
fair enough.
Is there value in separating out staff that are at Paddock for the Early Childhood Center versus that are part of young 5s through 2nd grade there?
Right now, this doesn't include any preschool staff. This is just young 5s through 2nd grade.
I think, isn't this new hire on here preschool staff?
No, the new hire is early childhood special ed, so that's part of K-12
That's part of K-12?
K-12
Okay.
programming, yes.
Thank you for that
It is a
clar-
preschool age, but it's funded like K-12.
Okay, thank you for that
Yep,
clarification.
absolutely.
All right, any more comments on those measures? All right, next up is finance and operations. So just some suggestions here. Basically, maintain the one for identifying and attend to HVAC and roof parking lot bus needs. Investigate a sinking fund millage and address critical technology needs. So these pretty much remain very similar, except more into the investigation of the sinking fund millage.
Can I suggest that address critical technology needs, can we put investigate and address? Because I don't think since pre-COVID have we received a presentation about what those critical needs are. I could be wrong in misremembering, but I recall a very robust discussion about that pre-COVID. And then critical needs during COVID, but not a post-COVID discussion.
I have no problem with that. I can tell you one of the critical needs coming up is our phone system. We're gonna have some needs there. Phone system and camera system, I'm hoping to address some of those through some of our safety dollars.
I think in that vein, and I only thought of it, Mr. Gearbout, when you just said cameras, whether or not recommendations should be under technology broadly, or whether we want perhaps investigate and address critical school safety measures or something of the sort.
Or is that a fourth?
That's my question, is whether or not what may be coming down the pike in the next year is encompassed in technology, or whether or not it may be a separate bullet in and of itself, because there may be strategies that.
That might better go in the first bullet, so identify and attend to critical safety, HVAC, roof.
Okay.
I think that one, it would actually fit better there.
I agree with that.
Okay.
So we'll add the word safety into that one.
Can I make a suggestion? Because to me, the school safety is such a critical point, I would actually like it to be its own bullet.
That would be blowing up the whole scorecard.
I know, I'm sorry.
Well, then we could move technology to the first list
I would like that.
and put
Oh, there
safety
you
as its
go.
own third bullet.
Okay.
Even better.
Okay.
So investigate and attend to critical technology, add technology there.
I like that.
And then in the bottom, investigate and address critical safety needs.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then obviously, just the measures are what has been done in regards to those objectives. And then we have the district fund balance there, and the district fund balance above 10%. And this was something that was discussed at the Big Red Board chat. Because the fact that we really don't, that number is only determined once a year. I mean, we have an idea of what it is at certain times for amendments and such, but it's only provided after the audit as to where we're at in regards to our expenditures and their fund balance. So again, even though we're done with the school year, we're not expected to get that number until November 2023 after the audit is complete. So I don't know if we wanted to put anything in the left-hand column about the reason that we want to have a 10% fund balance. I don't know if that's valuable to folks.
Do you just say per board goals?
That could be.
Just put in parentheses under fund balance above 10%, parentheses per board goal.
Because it really is a goal, just,
It is a goal.
yeah, per Board of Education goal, BOE goal.
All right, any other measures in regards to finance and operations? All right, that's very important work. I appreciate everybody's attentiveness to the scorecard. And like I said, we'll have a clean copy that we can continue to discuss at the next meeting if we want to make some minor tweaks to, but at least we'll have a clean copy.
Perfect.
That we work from, and move forward with.
So, question on that.
Yeah.
We have the objectives. We have two documents here that kind of feed off of each other. Do you just want me to update everything on the scorecard? I think we can just do everything on the scorecard and then bring
Yes.
it. And I will say, are you going to be ready to approve it at the next one, or do we want to bring a draft copy of this totally modified and have one more conversation and approve it at the next meeting?
I
I
think,
just feel like we're making quite a few changes that you might want to see a draft one more time.
I feel like the scorecard could be updated with those definitions and those, because you're not changing any of the other data on that scorecard, leaving the objectives the same. Because really those, right, then when we went through the scorecard, it was, that didn't change. The objectives are something different that really are now for this moving forward. So then if we update the scorecard with the definitions and those changes that we made, not changing any of the objectives, and then after we approve the new objectives, after our next board meeting, if in fact that's when we approve them, then we could update the objectives and actually have kind of a back-to-back update on the website. Am I making sense? Because I don't think we want to change the objectives
You're
yet.
making sense, but I think this one I don't know that, I would say that any of the changes that, as far as we, doing some explanations and things like that, I don't know that, I feel like that's just for the next one.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that this scorecard needs to get posted because that was the close of the 22-23 school year,
Yep.
without any objective changes.
Yep.
Without any definitions and all that stuff,
That's
too,
fine, I
or
don't-
I'm just trying to understand what you...
Yeah, we can discuss that. Do you guys want to, I feel that we could, this can stand alone as the scorecard for the end of the school year.
And then just the way we got it today, that goes out.
Yep,
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
that's my,
I'm good with that.
that's my thought.
That's
And
fine.
then, I think.
When we approve
but then-
everything else.
And now we'll have a draft scorecard. I mean, it could still have all this information on it,
Right.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so publish one that's, other than the one typo I found, publish it as is.
As it,
And then bring you a draft of this with all of the new definitions on it, the new objectives on it, and the objectives just won't be, those new objectives won't be color-coded,
correct.
because they won't get a color code till the next time we look
Well,
at
they'll
them.
be
They'll
yellow.
Well, some of them stayed the same.
Right. That's what I'm saying. The ones that stayed the same could keep the color code. The ones that are new would not have a color code yet. They'd just be, or that we could make them red, however you want
That
to do
seems
it.
harsh.
I think they should not be color-coded
Okay.
for now, and then when we do the first quarterly
That seems
review,
way harsh.
we'll assign a color.
Correct.
Right? Yeah.
That's what I was leaning towards.
I gave these to you last week and now they're red.
All right,
All right,
cool.
so we're going to publish this as is to the website,
Yes.
and then I'm going to bring you a draft of this that integrates new objectives, definitions, all of that stuff.
Perfect.
Awesome.
You could use a different color, like put in grayscale, right? The new goals that are being added, as opposed to, I don't know. That's my suggestion.
Put them in blue.
There you go.
I think too, I picked a different yellow, green, and red. The yellow and green, to me, are really close to each other on the actual scorecard. They're a little bit brighter and more differentiated on the other document. So I think I'll switch
I agree.
just to get a little bit better green and yellow.
Context.
All right.
Okay, thank you for that work.
All right, next up in the area of personnel and leadership, we do have a teacher appointment. I need a motion to appoint following person to the teaching position listed and base salary listed effective immediately for the 23-24 school year. Kyle McIntosh, Milan Middle School social worker.
Moved by Rosenleacher.
Support by Gutierrez.
It's been moved and supported to appoint the following person to the teaching position listed and base salary listed effective immediately for the 23-24 school year. Kyle McIntosh to the Milan Middle School's social worker. Any comments or concerns? Ms. Heike?
Rosenleacher,
Yes.
Sislo,
Yes.
Pharaoh,
Yes.
Gutierrez,
Yes.
Heike, yes. Murray,
Yes.
motion carries 6-0.
All right, that'll bring us to the agenda item that we added, which is the athletic director compensation. I need a motion to approve the athletic director's 2023-2024 compensation of $85,600.
Moved by Pharaoh.
Support by Gutierrez.
So moved and supported to approve the athletic director's 2023-2024 compensation of $85,600. Discussion, Mr. Gearbaugh provided us a comparison sheet. Can you provide some background, Mr. Gearbaugh, how you came to the $85,600?
Yeah, so I can walk you through this a little bit over what's happened. So I think it was at the last board meeting, Mrs. Gutierrez asked, kind of when do we do this? And we kind of had some of that discussion in the scorecard tonight. And part of my response is we always do that when we post a position. Our athletic director did accept a position in another location. And at that point, the high school principal and I did our research, and the research is here, and we came up with a value to put into the posting, which was $82,000 to $88,000, depending on experience. Our teacher contract allows us to grant up to 11 years of experience, and so my thought was that the 82 to 88, 82 was a first-year person, and 88 was a person that was going into year 11. Again, kind of matching our teachers that we have salaries and we can give up to 11 years experience. So as you can see, when we subdivide that, it kind of puts 600, if you distribute it equally, it's about a $600 increment for each year of experience that that person comes in with. After we put the posting out, there was a conversation between our high school principal and the athletic director regarding the salary that was in the new posting, and mentioned that he would like to have a conversation about possibly staying if that salary and that scale was offered to him. So we've had several conversations with him back and forth, and at this point, he would stay for the 85.6, which is within the realm of our posting and gives him the 7-year experience that he actually has. 4 here and 2 in another district, so putting him into the beginning of his 7th year as an athletic director. I will tell you that comparing athletic directors is very, very difficult to do because some athletic directors are also assistant principals. Some athletic directors also take care of community education. So don't look at these and automatically assume anything from them. It's very difficult. You can go down, there's a district down at the bottom that says plus home game pay. That person has a salary and then makes a stipend every single home game that they attend. So it's just really hard to compare athletic director. The research that I have here, when you see a base salary and a max salary, there are some districts where their athletic director is in their administrative group, and so they have a scale. That's not the case in Milan. It's also interesting, you have a district that has a scale, and then that person is making way outside of that scale. So it really is hard to compare. I had good conversation with our high school principal. At the time, we assumed the athletic director had moved on, and we truly felt that 82 to 88 was the appropriate range for our new hire. And then when our current athletic director came back and said, can we talk about this? I said, well, I would put you on that scale where you would appropriately fit.
Do we know of these salaries that are listed, other than the one that indicates that there is a stipend for every home game they attend? Which one of these also have other responsibilities? As you mentioned, a principal, community ed, things like that?
I could get that. It would take quite a while. Their contracts aren't out there. I've got to try and reach out to HRs, reach out to superintendents, get them to respond. I'm not saying it's impossible to get that information, but it would be incredibly time consuming. Not that we can't do it, but if we want to do anything for our current athletic director, it'd have, kind of have to be in a timely fashion.
I can tell you Celine is only athletics. That's just the one that I know.
I'm sorry, which one?
Celine.
But we don't know their
We don't
actual
have an
salary,
actual
we just know the
salary.
band.
I can tell you Celine's she's 1.5 years in, so, and theirs is a step system, so it's probably closer to the lower end.
Yes.
I can tell you Tecumseh, that athletic director does all K-12, so does all of the community programs, like our Little Reds programs, all of those things. For those that don't know, the reason I put those 5 districts there, those were districts that we were said to be comparable to by MASB when we did our strategic planning. And I will tell you, the way that I got those salaries was I went out, I found out who their athletic director was, and then I went to the Mackinac Center's reporting of salaries and looked them up. Brandon's, I believe, was new enough that his salary wasn't out there, but theirs is in the administrative contract, so I could give you the band. Mm-hmm. So I did my best to bring you what I could collect.
So, Mr. Gearba, could you provide a little more context about where the posting range came from? Because, well, let me stop there. Where that posting range came from? Is it based solely on comparative districts, or is it based upon information among our non-affiliated staff within the district?
I did my best to move that salary in the right direction after doing this research, but also keeping it within reason and within the bounds of the size of our school and some different things. It's not a science.
Right, I agree.
I think it's a fair range compared to where we were and where we might eventually want to be.
Well, looking at the Huron League, and I know they're not our MASB comparative districts, but they are part of our league, and you look at the first 3 who have less years than our current AD. In some cases, they're quite a bit more than what you're proposing.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't know if they have extra duties too,
That's correct. Thank you.
right?
I also think it's important, and I brought it, what did I do with it? I thought I brought it. I think it is important to know that that range of 82 to 88, the 88 starts to put this person at what some of our principals and assistant principals are making. So I did not go out and do the research of what these other districts' principals and assistant principals make, but I'm going to guess I can tell you for a lot of them that I have the bands for, their athletic director was making less than their elementary principals at these salary bands. So I think we've got to be mindful of not getting our salary for our athletic director skewed against our other administrators in the district as well. So that was part of the decision.
Well, I also want to be careful because $85,600 is more than teachers who've been here for over a decade make, depending on when they started.
I think it's important to keep in mind the athletic director is a year-round position as well.
So I'm going to start this by saying that I think Mr. Hall has done a phenomenal job over I think it's now 4 years that he's been here. I think he's done incredible things, particularly for our sports that don't get huge attendance every Friday night. And, you know, he's done wonders in helping to promote our tennis team along with, you know, Coach Rodriguez. Our soccer teams are flourishing. He's, you know, helped provide resources so that our hockey teams are flourishing. Our polo team now is doing great as well. Having said all that, I have the same concerns that I had 2 weeks ago when we gave a similar raise to our technology director. And that while we're no longer having to lay off any teachers, we are still down a teacher. I believe it's the second and the fifth grade. One of these days I'm going to remember what those grades are. And the average class size in those classrooms are going to go up higher than what I personally think we really want them to be. I'm concerned that we are basing this salary band on data that is a bit incomplete. And I get that it's difficult to get. I'm not criticizing you at all, Brian, about getting it. That, you know, we know that the Mackinac Center data is fraught with problems. And we say that when people use that data at board meetings on what they think, they think we should handle things. We don't know what other duties these other athletic directors in these other communities are doing in addition to the athletic director spot, if any. And I'm concerned that, you know, if you know, we talked about this in our benchmarking discussion, if we have individuals who are not making market, you know, I'd like to know who those individuals are, and I'd like to see, you know, some real benchmarking information rather than it coming to us because someone resigned, and then we had a discussion, and then we decided that the bandwidth should shift. So I'm not comfortable given the state of the budget in doing this. I'm not comfortable giving some of our class sizes in doing this. I'm not comfortable because of the way that it happened, agreeing to this. And, you know, I just, I would like more time to be able to think about it and see where this is going to fit into the budget, see what we can do with perhaps teachers. We're still trying to figure out some of the monies that are going to be coming from the school aid budget. We know the per pupil funding, but there's some other additional funds that are coming in. And And so I'm just not comfortable doing it today. I'm not sure that that means at the next meeting, I can't get to a point where I'm more comfortable, if we can be patient. But I'm just not comfortable agreeing to this today. I'm really sorry, Mr. Hull.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. I'm very much hearing what you're saying, Michelle, and I'm very conflicted about this for the reasons that you articulated, yet coupled with the possibility that this, not approving this, may mean that we are losing a beloved and fantastic employee for perhaps a brand-new person to our district that we don't know anything about, for a difference of what may be about $3,500. So I think it's a question of whether or not the salary bands in the posting would be preserved should we not pursue this. Because what I'm hearing is then we would be bringing in potentially a brand-new AD at a salary of, sorry, I didn't bring my reading glasses, $82,000. So we would be getting someone that we don't fully know, that would be new to our district, for a potential savings here of $3,600. So I am conflicted. I agree that these decisions should be taken incredibly carefully, that there are really important ramifications of this decision across the staff in our district in terms of equity. And this is another example, I think, of why it is so important that we continue to review these. And I'm very conflicted because of this conundrum of it would mean we were losing someone beloved for a relatively small amount of money.
Mr. Sislo?
Yes, Mr. Carroll.
I concur with what Ms. Gutierrez said. You know, the situation that we are faced with is the district put the position, determined that the position's salary is between 82 and 88,000. The reality is if Mr. Hull does not continue with the district, we will be hiring somebody new between 82 and 88,000. I'm comfortable supporting the 85.6 for Mr. Hull. However, that said, as we talked earlier during the meeting, I think it's important that we have a coordinated plan for future discussion dialogue with respect to administrators and other employees, their compensation, their packages. I think it's important that we take a look at how and when salary ranges are determined. You know, the situation that we're in right now is that the district posted the AD position at a higher salary rate than what was in the recent past. So for me, you know, if the AD salary range was not at current market rate, you know, obviously I wish that would have been brought to our attention sooner. But that said, given the options available to us, I concur with Michelle, what she said. I concur with Carrie. I think Mr. Hull is an extremely important member of our community. I think he's done a spectacular job in terms of hiring coaches, retaining coaches. His interaction with our student athletes is just remarkable. And I acknowledge that the optics are not good, once again. But I think, you know, we need to have the conversation about ensuring that all of our staff, including teachers in the future, are being compensated near or at market rate. So I'm prepared to support the 85.6 for our athletic director, but I do think that we need to have a coordinated plan for these types of discussions in the future with other administrators and other employees.
Thank you, Mr. Farrow. Others?
Mr. Sislo?
Yeah, Ms. Rosenleischer.
I would concur with everything that's been stated, and I feel, while I have a lot of conflict myself, I think the fact that the conversation we had earlier this evening and one of the major tasks that we have Mr. Gearbaugh working on moving forward, or that I think that we will approve, is that benchmarking and looking and monitoring these things where maybe we can have kind of a unified plan for the different positions that are outliers, especially like this. Should somebody leave, where are we going to be? I could support moving forward at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Rosenleischer. Others?
Mr. Sislo?
Yes, Ms. Murray.
I share Ms. Heike's reticence to move forward today. And I will echo and concur my full faith and support in Mr. Hall, and certainly do not want to lose him as a part of our staff. However, perhaps it's attributable to me being just a very green board member, but I'm seeing these numbers and trying to make sense of them for the very first time tonight, and it feels reactive as opposed to proactive, and I am very stuck between, a deep desire to do what's best for the district. I mean, when you boil it all down, we are either going to keep someone at this salary or we are going to hire someone new within that same salary range. So I fully appreciate that, but I very much would have appreciated more time to absorb and think.
Can I just share some, the
Absolutely.
one thing I think, and I appreciate that, this position's already been posted.
Right.
Under the salary schedule, though.
Right.
With the thought that Mr. Hall was leaving.
Right. I'm curious about the optics of posting that range.
Understood.
If this was our current AD salary, again, green board member, willing to learn, but yeah, I'll end there. I'll echo. We need to attend to those things that we discussed earlier in the scorecard for me to get more comfortable around these things. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Sislo?
Yeah.
Can I add, I appreciate very much the value that additional time on this decision would give us. I think that in light of the larger question about salary and benchmarking, that is something that we should take on with great care and attention. I do have a concern that time is of the essence with a decision such as this, and I don't know how much I can say. I know the board is privy to this, but I do believe time is of the essence, and that if we do not make a decision on this, I believe that we may be in a position where we will end up just where I mentioned, and Mr. Farrow mentioned, that we may have a new person coming in, making a very comparable salary based upon the position that was posted.
And it could be disruptive. Just from my perspective, I think it could be disruptive not having an AD for a period of time.
I appreciate all the thoughts. The perspectives are valued. I do believe time is of the essence in regards to this, just based on where we're at in the seasons. The fact that that Mr. Hall is looking at another area to work. The decision was made to post this salary range, and he found that attractive, and had conversations in regards to that. He is a capable athletic director. I think he's viewed as one of the leaders in the Huron League. I think we can do two things at the same time. I think we can approve this tonight based on the timing, and then continue to have that conversation that we talked about this evening in regards to non-bargain for staff. I think those can happen at the same time. You know, based on these salaries, it does appear that even if we approving it now, it looks that he would be on the low end of what these comparables are. But based on what was posted, you know, if he was an outside applicant with 7 years experience, based on my knowledge of how he performs the job, there's no doubt that he's capable and can do it. And I think we should approve the salary for Mr. Hall.
Can I say one more thing?
Absolutely.
So, given that we made clear tonight in the goals that we expect this benchmarking to happen and that we expect this information to be shared with the board, and the fact that this position has already been posted at this pay range, and as you said, Mr. Sislo, if we were to hire someone in at 7 years, we're going to pay them that amount anyway, given on the previous posting. As a way of compromise, I'm willing to support this tonight because I do appreciate those facts, and I appreciate Mr. Hull and all that he has done for the district. But I hope that this is seen as a compromise on my part, and that in the future, these discussions will happen much sooner, so that we're not in a position to make these kinds of choices again, because I don't think I will be as accommodating next time. Because I hear everything, I don't want to lose a valuable resource to the district either, but we already lose valuable resources just because we don't have the money. And, you know, we have many teachers who have gone on just down the road where they make significantly more money. And so this is an ongoing problem in our district just because of the way the budgets work. And so I hear that, but I want to be cognizant of the fact that this happens with our teaching staff often, and we don't change the salary bands or renegotiate the contract every time that happens. Hasn't happened in a while, but it happens.
And I don't doubt that that is going to be a topic of discussion during the teacher negotiations. I'm just
As
being
it should be.
As it should be. I
As
agree.
it should be, yes.
I mean, I think it's important that we take a look at all groups and across the board, and that we do that on a consistent basis.
Mm-hmm. And I think this and the other decision recently are evidence of our commitment to that objective that we just stated in our strategic goals for the upcoming year. And I truly mean all of our staff, both our non-bargained and our contract-based staff. I think that's incredibly important to show that commitment as a board. And we're looking at individual scenarios here, but we need that full picture, and that full picture benchmarked both against other districts in the market as well as our own budget, and so that we can in the future have the time and have the foresight to be able to make these more informed decisions moving forward.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? All right, it's been moved and supported to approve the athletic director's 2023-2024 compensation of $85,600. Ms. Heike?
Farrow.
Yes.
Gutierrez.
Yes.
Heike, yes. Murray.
Yes.
Rosenleacher.
Yes.
Sislo.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Next up, in communications and community engagement, brings us back to public comment. And just a reminder, this meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public meeting. There are 2 times for public participation during the meeting as indicated in the agenda. When addressing the board, you will be asked to state your name. The board determines the amount of time granted to individuals or groups to speak. Each person shall be allowed to speak for up to 3 minutes. Board members may question speakers but are not obligated to answer questions or make statements or commitments in response to issues raised by the public. In general, such items will be referred to the superintendent for advisement, investigation, study, and a recommendation are designated as future agenda items for board consideration. Are there any students who'd like to address the board? Are there any public members who'd like to address the board? All right, seeing none. Again, our student board representatives are excused for the summer unless they decide to attend. Mr. McMahon is not in attendance this evening. Mr. Gearbaugh.
Yes, just a few things to share this evening. First, I do greatly appreciate the moment of silence earlier in the meeting. Very difficult situation, not only for the family, but for our staff. To deal with the loss of a student. Any student loss is difficult, but at such a young age, it's even more difficult. So just please keep that family in your thoughts as they try and work through incredibly difficult times. I do want to let the board know that in August, I will be providing you a resolution to approve the Michigan School Energy Cooperative. So that's MESIC. That's an energy cooperative that we're in. We buy all of our electric and natural gas through them. Basically what it does is it allows us to buy from any supplier. MESIC goes out and looks for the best price. It's a large consortium of school districts. And then we can purchase it at that price, and then it's delivered to us through the normal providers in this area, but we get to purchase it at a price. MESIC went out and negotiated purchasing some clean electric from a solar farm. And they were actually able to get a 15-year rate lock on the electricity that they would purchase. I have a little bit of research left to do yet to see exactly where that rate stands versus what we're paying with MESIC, and it's always a gamble. But to me, if that rate is very close or below what we're paying right now, personally, I think the possibility of electric costs going down over the next 15 years is slim to none. And so if we have the option to do a rate lock, I think it's a good idea. The resolution actually includes what percentage of our electric we would approve to purchase through the solar. And I've talked with the directors of MESIC to try and find out, because to me it's like, okay, if we get a rate lock, why wouldn't we do 100%? Right? They're not recommending that. They're saying the districts that are truly high risk are going 70%. The majority of the districts are going 50%. So I have a little bit more investigating to do, but I wanted to give you a heads up that I will be bringing a resolution to you. We can also purchase none and just keep paying the MESIC rate, which is still better than if we were buying it straight from the local providers of electric and gas. But I think it gives us an opportunity to possibly have some savings, and I think if we do like 50%, it kind of balances the pros and cons. If it goes up a little bit, we're okay. If it goes down a little bit, we're okay, but we're also buying some clean energy, and that in and of itself has a little bit of a benefit to our world. So I just wanted to give you a heads up that that's coming. I will have more information coming. I will have some comparatives of the costs and things, but I wanted to let you know that that is something that I'm working on. I also wanted to let you know that we donated some unused furniture to the middle school WAVE program, about one classroom of desks and chairs that we had available that will help them get started up in that program, which is something that we want to see without having to do a major expenditure for some desks and chairs. And honestly, they were desks and chairs that we've had in a storage closet for a couple of years, so it's not something that we needed in the classrooms right now. The District Communications Committee did meet this Monday. The committee welcomed the 3 new members. We spent some time getting to know them and them getting to know the current members. And then they did some discussion about goals that they want to set for next year and what our drive and accomplishments hope to be during the 23-24 school year. And we've now taken a hiatus until September, and then we'll be back at it, and they'll start by reviewing that survey information and then moving forward with what they learned from that survey information. A state budget update as best I can provide right now. I'm going to go through several different areas of the budget and do my best to explain them to you. Some of them, as you know, legislature passes a budget and there might be 3 sentences that explain spending $80 million, and then MDE and other organizations have to figure out exactly what those 3 sentences mean. So I can't tell you clearly yet what all of these are, but I just thought it would be good to give you an update. So the foundation allowance is locked in at $9,608 per pupil. We budgeted $9,600 per pupil. I'm very glad that we budgeted based on the middle of the road recommendation and not the high end recommendation, or we'd be sitting here having about $100 per pupil issue to resolve beyond what our preliminary budget already says. So we will be adding $8 per pupil, but I think we made the right move in approving our preliminary budget at that dollar amount. Enrollment stabilization, there are a lot of districts that are declining in enrollment, and the state realizes that, and so they are putting a formula in to help districts that have declining enrollment. The interesting piece right now is they haven't said, is there a cut for a % of decline that you have to have before you accept this money? And there's still a little bit of debate over what the formula really is. I've attended a couple of sessions done by state organizations, and what I'm hearing is that they will basically do a blend of your 22-23 blended and 23-24 blended counts. So they'll come up with a blend of 2 blendeds and then fund you based on that. If that's the case, that would be beneficial to Milan area schools. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, this is just, I'm telling you what they told me. It would be beneficial to Milan as we have declined from last year to, we assume we're going to decline from last year to this year. And that would provide us some funding. I don't think it's going to be a huge windfall, but it will help ease that decline a little bit. They did make a change in MIPSers, which actually I am supportive of. In the past, they were helping MIPSers by giving us money and then we give it right back. They are still doing some of that, but this time they also gave us 0.5% of our retirement costs being directly reimbursed to us. Now, remember, the rates just went up a couple of %, so all they did was kind of minimize slightly the increase that we saw, but this is a nice path because one of the things I like is they now have started to put language in that they are going to help districts with their current retirement costs, just not with offsetting the existing concern. And so at least there's language in there now that they could bump this up or they could keep it, but it's a different way of helping us, and it truly does help us. It's not give it to us and take it back, it's give it to us and let us use it to pay part of our bill. So that is a good move. I have not done calculations yet on exactly what that is, and that's tough because people are in all kinds of different retirement plans. Special education, they have locked that foundation in at the full $9,608, which, believe it or not, in the past, you didn't truly get a full foundation. This doesn't drastically affect us because we are a full inclusion district, so we don't have very many students that are 100% special education. So our early childhood classroom is, and we've got a few students here and there that are like 0.22s or of an FTE. This isn't going to mean a drastic difference to us, but it will help. At risk, there was a large influx of funding into at risk. We don't know how those calculations are going to be done or what that means. I will say it will benefit Milan area schools, but I have no idea what the dollar amount is that it's going to benefit us yet. We have to wait for those formulas to be done. The budget did include free lunch for all. I am going to say right now, it is going to be critical, though, that districts still urge their families that qualify to apply, partly because the first thing that's going to happen is the federal free and reduced money will come in, and then Michigan will make up for all the students that don't receive federal. And also remember, we have a lot of other grants that are based on the number of students that qualify for free and reduced. So if we don't urge our families and keep our families applying that meet it, we could start to lose at-risk money or start to lose other money down the road. This is good news. I will tell you, it will help our food service. We will be able to possibly look at some salary adjustments in that department they are fairly low. But again, we've required that to be a self-sustaining program, and so with some extra funding, and we learned in the 2 years during COVID when it was free for all, it helped our budget. And so we look at this as a positive for our food service budget. And it will require us, I'm sure, to add some staff into each of our kitchens, but the funding is going to be there to do it, because we'll increase staff because we're going to be serving more meals, which means we have more income coming in. The GSRP Foundation allowance was made whole at the $9,608. Again, GSRP used to not always get the full foundation allowance, so that was nice that they did that. They also raised the eligibility from 250% of poverty to 300% of poverty. So that will, for us, a lot of what it will do is slide some students from our tuition program over into our GSRP program, which is a good thing for those families. That will also then possibly open up some slots in our tuition program, which is full right now, and allow some students on our wait list to get in. So it will have a double benefit. The state also said that if the 300% poverty level doesn't use all of the funding, that they will then jump to possibly up to 400% of the poverty level. I truly believe this is their initial effort to move towards that free preschool for all. They don't quite know how to do it yet, but they realize they can just expand GSRP, which is already free, and kind of start to move towards that direction. I will say that our early childhood director had a walkthrough with our WISD childhood director. She may have learned more. I haven't had a chance to talk to her. They walked together, I think, about 1 o'clock today, so I haven't got an update. Safety and mental health funds were combined in this budget. So there's going to be safety and mental health all in one budget. There is language in there that says 50% of those funds have to be spent on mental health supports, but we're waiting for a lot of clarity on what all of that means. There's an interesting piece in the budget about teacher student loan repayment. Believe it or not, there is the possibility that districts are going to get into the business of helping our teachers pay back their student loans and then requesting reimbursement from the state of Michigan. I don't know any of the details on this. I do have some concern. I mean, I want to be able to do that for our staff. That's not my concern. The concern is what amount of paperwork and expertise are we going to have in knowing, does this person's student loan qualify versus this person's doesn't, and how do we know that, and how much do we get reimbursed? And there could be a lot of time consumption on our payroll and benefits office depending on how this ends up rolling out. I could even see there being third parties that step up and just start doing that for districts, because there are a lot of districts that just aren't going to have the expertise to do that. Transportation, there are some funds in the budget for districts that have low ridership per square mile. My understanding is that they're somehow going to divide all of the districts in the state into 4 quartiles, so 4 groups of average ridership per square mile, and then the majority of those funds will go to districts that truly have the lowest number of students per square mile. We will not be in that quartile. My guess is we will probably either be in the other end or in the second quartile. So I don't believe this is going to be a large windfall for us, but again, the fact that they started to put something in about helping districts that provide transportation, because remember, you have some very high pupil count districts that have very little transportation when you get into high populated areas. If your district is only a square mile or two and you have 10,000 kids coming in, you run a couple of special ed buses, and they're not spending the $1 million on transportation that we do, and they now have that money to go spend somewhere else. So it's just good that they're starting to get that. And again, a lot of this is coming out of that huge research study that was done. We're starting to see a little bit of that start to actually work its way into the budget. The last piece, and there are very little details on this, there is what they called an educator compensation fund, and it is a fund to raise salaries. What we don't know yet is if it's a one-time deal, districts are going to have to be very careful with making permanent increases to salaries. And so there's almost no information out there about this yet. We will gladly accept the funds and distribute them to our staff in the way that's supportive and helpful to them, but also fiscally responsible, not taking on a legacy cost for something that the state's going to help us with one time. So we're excited to see how it works, but I think we need to also proceed with caution. That's all I have this evening, and I can answer questions on any of those budget items. I know that's a lot, but there's a lot in this budget, and there's still a lot to weed out and decipher as we learn more.
No, I know MASB had that presentation, and you and Krista attended. I appreciate you being on top of it, and there is a lot in that budget, and even the experts that have been with it, they say it's a lot, so there is a lot to digest, so I appreciate the breakdown. Board member comments.
Mr. Sislo.
Yeah, Mr. Farrow.
I just wanted to comment again on my support for returning to the boardroom for Board of Education meetings. I did want to clarify earlier comments when I said that I had not had a meeting in the Board of Education room. Obviously, I've had attended closed session meetings in the boardroom as well as appeals and disciplinary hearings, but I am looking forward to returning to the boardroom for our meetings. Mr. Gearbaugh gave a very good summary of the budget, the state budget. The state budget will impact us in a positive way, obviously. So at some time in the fall, early winter, I'm sure that we'll be looking at potential budget adjustments. Obviously, the per pupil revenue will increase, as Brian said, funds for universal free breakfast, lunch, various grants, et cetera. The other thing I just wanted to mention is for month-end May 2023, I had inquired of Krista, our finance director, on when we would anticipate final federal state payments, and she had provided me the response that grant payments will be received through the summer. They are not collected until we have paid all of our bills for fiscal year end. Many of the grants are wage-based, so we will get those reimbursements. We won't get those reimbursements until we have paid staff. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. And then finally, we will have an audit coming up in the near future. The first half of our audit fee is due August 31st. So I will connect with Krista in the district office on, if we've made that payment or when we'll make that payment. We'll be using the same firm that we've used in the recent past, and that's Riemann. So that's all for me.
Thank you, Mr. Farrow. Others?
Mr. Sislo?
Yes, Ms. Rosenlinger.
Just kind of two quick things. Number one, the Big Red Chats have been scheduled, as we indicated at the last meeting. The next Big Red Chat will be August 29th at Paddock. And in addition, I was able to get all of those meetings scheduled on the city website. So those are now posted there with our big red M. So hopefully people recognize that it's a school-related function. And it was much easier than I was led to believe it was going to be to get those posted. So that's done. Something else that's very near and dear to me and that I'm very excited about, part of the budget that came out from the state includes this Talent Together program to bring our young people into the field of education. So if you haven't heard about it, 48 of 57 counties are participating, 9 universities in collaboration with 9 universities. They're looking to provide certification for people who are new to education or want to add endorsements to their certificates. It isn't kind of just anything you want to do, but specifically in early childhood, special education, birth to kindergarten, lower elementary pre-K to 3rd grade, upper elementary 3rd to 6th grade, English as a second language, K-12 special education, including endorsements in autism, cognitive impairment, emotional impairment, and learning disabilities, and secondary certification areas, integrated science and mathematics. So that secondary is pretty tight on what they're looking to help with. This would be a fully funded program for individuals wanting to get their teaching licensure. They can have a bachelor's in something else and go back. They can be just getting started. They can be transferring over, but the state is investing a lot of money. And in addition, they're also looking to apply for federal internships with the potential that these could be truly valued and paid internships like a lot of other fields have to really help support young people who have a passion and desire to go into education. So if you're interested, if you go to mitalenttogether.org, the information's there. The 2023 cohort is already full, and they're taking applications of interest for the 2024 cohort. So I'm excited. Let's get more people who love education to get into our classrooms.
A couple of pieces of information on that. If you didn't know, while the work was done by a tremendous amount of counties, the work actually originated out of Washtenaw County and some work that the superintendents were doing. And a huge thank you to our ISD superintendent, Naomi Norman, for really starting this charge. And it did. It spiraled quickly from one county trying to do something to almost the entire state being involved. We have applied to be a potential host site, and we will see if we're a host site next year for some of those folks that are looking to do the internship piece. And the nice part with this is that now is funded through this fund. So I think we spoke about this briefly. The nice piece of this is they applied for the grant, the Grow Your Own grant, and didn't get it. And there was a lot of concern about why they didn't get it. And then we found out the reason they didn't get it is because the state was going to put it in the budget in its whole, which takes away some of those grant requirements and lets the program actually function a little bit easier.
And it helps to meet one of our goals of providing support to teachers in years 0 to 5. It is teachers who do this, it's a 5-year commitment to their host district. So there's a lot. I'm so excited to see something going really, really right at the state level for education.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Others?
Mr. Sislo?
Yes, Ms. Gutierrez.
I'd like to just first personally express my deep condolences to the Schindel family for the loss of their daughter and to all of our staff and students who are affected by that. It's deeply sad, and I've been thinking a lot about it, and they've really been on my mind. My second comment is, I noticed, Mr. Gearbaugh, in the weekly memo that there have been dates set for open houses at all of the buildings, which is fantastic. As a parent who seems to get those like the week before they are scheduled, I would kindly request that the administrators push those out to families as soon as possible. I feel like summer is imminently ending, and I'm already getting my last 2 weeks of August calendars put together, and I think that families would appreciate it. So given that those dates have been set, it seems like the sooner we can get that to families, the better. And then, of course, with reminders, but pushing that out by email, social media, even a district-wide message would be very important, especially for students who are changing buildings and really want to be there for the open houses. So that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we did have a plan after the 4th of July, which we now are at, to put out an instant message, just as here are the open house dates for all 4 buildings, and to start to get that out, so.
Great. I was
Trying
glad to
find
get the
right
first
time not to
dibs on
do
them.
it too early, but I also agree not to do it too late.
I tell you, as soon as I saw them, they were in on my calendar, so I'm sure other
We're
families
going
are
to
in
get that
them.
out in the next
Yeah,
couple of days,
thank
for
you.
sure.
Others?
Mr. Sislo.
Yes, Ms. Heike.
So I would like to request that at our next board meeting or soon thereafter, that we continue this discussion that I keep pushing for on whether or not the new state budget would allow us to hire additional teachers in the 2nd and 5th grade to keep those costs down, or class sizes down. It seems that as this budget becomes more clarified, we'll know more what additional funds we are going to receive, and so that we will know whether or not we can afford that, and if we can, I strongly encourage us to do that. I think that as we were looking at our goals tonight, it occurred to me that we should probably provide some information to the community, maybe, and I don't know if you're still doing the scoops from the soup or, something on the website that defines social emotional learning and 21st century skills for our community. I know that at least social emotional learning is kind of a buzzword that often gets used incorrectly. And so I think that some information from the district to the community on, at least in terms of how we define that term and 21st century skills, I think would be helpful for people to have another resource other than Twitter and Facebook and other social medias and news media and what those terms mean. And then I have a question about the free lunch. And I know this is very early on, but I hope that on our list of things to think about and how we're implementing is, I'm sure parents are going to start asking about what happens to positive balances that are in their students' lunch funds. I personally don't keep a huge balance in there. I feel like I'm constantly putting money in there, but I do know there's money in there, and so I'm just kind of wondering, how that works. My graduate timed it down to the penny, so he knew how many chicken bowls he could get on the
But they
last
can
day.
still use it for items other than lunch, right? I mean,
Well, if you're allowed to do that.
Yes, they could,
right.
they could possibly use it. Well, and here's what we don't know is, remember, more than likely, the free lunch for all is the one prepared meal that meets the requirements. So there are some stations that they might go through, specifically here at the high school, that don't meet that criteria and then aren't free. At the other buildings, middle school, there are a few a la carte items that fall into that. But yeah, we will be, I can tell you, I already got an email from our food service director's regional supervisor that there are about 4 different sessions that they're going to over the next month to figure out how this plays out. And then this is a time where it's nice to have a Chartwell's
Right.
and not be responsible to try and figure this out ourselves. I mean, Chartwell's is going to figure this out because of the number of districts they handle in the state of Michigan. So we'll be getting good guidance from them, and yes, positive balances. Also, there are some criteria to get this. One of them that we're looking for a little bit more clarity is free and reduced lunch for all preschool students as well, which we have not done
Right.
in the past. It does require that you do clear all negative balances. So we would have to clear all, and we don't have very many. We work hard not to have them, but there are 2 or 3 stipulations that say you have to do this in order to meet this qualification. So, but yes, that's absolutely something we're going to have to look at, and could become a little bit of an issue if we have to distribute,
That's what I thought, so I wanted to
1,900
throw it
checks
out there.
for $22.18, and yeah, but we do need to look into that.
My daughter
because
currently has a
people do
balance of
have money in their
$4.25.
accounts.
I get a weekly email. That's all I had.
Thank you.
Ms. Murray?
No other comments tonight, thank you.
Ms. Rosenleacher, I thank you for the reminder of the Big Red Board Chat, because at the next meeting, we should decide who's going to attend and the topic. So keep that in mind. We may have some, I may call you offline to see who can attend, and some topics that we can consider for that big red board chat. I do appreciate the conversation on the scorecard. That is important work for the board and this district, and provides a line of sight for everybody in the district on what is important that we're working on. There was a ton that was accomplished in this past year, and I thank Mr. Yearbaugh and the administrative staff and all the staff of the Milan area schools in accomplishing those goals and turning them from clear to red to yellow to green. So I'm excited to see the new goals and where we're going to move forward with that. So, and again, just a reminder, our next board meeting will be in the boardroom in August. So everybody have a great rest of the July and be safe. And the meeting is adjourned at 9:57.
For those that don't know, we are under a tornado watch until 3 a.m.
Thank you.
That rate, that's part of what I was looking at my phone for. It was rave alerts coming in on my phone.
Oh,